So then is this a one-time purchase of a program?
Yes, it will be a one-time charge to do the programming and get it set up within our diamond system, and then we can use that well into the future.
Okay.
And that's why we've suggested using the revenue sharing to offset that cost.
Okay, any other questions? We're all good? All right, we'll move on then. Economic development.
The main change here is, you'll see under grants to individuals, we've actually moved the beautification grant from community services over to economic development. That's the grant that businesses can apply for if they're doing up their properties. It was always administered through community services, and now we've moved it over to economic development for them to administer that.
Yeah, it's a much better fit.
Mm-hmm. That's what we thought too.
Through to administration, how has the uptake been on that this past year?
Yeah, so my understanding is that we allocated the entire amount for this past year. Yeah, so we anticipate having another strong appetite for that in next year.
Okay.
We have suggested that come from the revenue sharing. There was a property beautification grant that has now been used up. There's nothing left in that reserve. So this would be something that if people come and actually take advantage of the grant, we would just fund that from that revenue sharing. If they don't, then we wouldn't. So it's an amount that's put in there as an upper limit, but whatever advantage is taken of that, we could then fund that from the revenue sharing, so there's no impact on the taxes.
That makes sense.
Any other comments, questions? Nope. Okay, we'll move on.
Land sales.
Aye.
We have amended the sales figure to a more realistic, is that a sales figure? What happens with this reserve though is generally what is made from land sales is put straight into a reserve. So if you notice on the two columns with the budget, you'll see there's actually no tax impact because we actually remove the full amount over to a reserve. So if we do sell some stuff, that goes in. If we don't, then it doesn't. So.
Do you have any idea on our 2018 actuals for that?
I don't at this time, sorry, I haven't looked at sales. I believe there's been one that I know of.
Yeah, there's been one, but we also have sold another property over on the west end there. A new building being built there, so
It's
400,000
maybe.
Councillor
I'll have to look at that.
Through the chair to administration. So then before was any land sales just going directly into our tax? We were how I just don't understand what we're doing differently.
Sorry, what was that question?
Where
No, it's always, or certainly since I've been here and I think beyond, it was just always to fund that reserve. What happened was the intention was for the sales to pay for the debenture that was used to build Hillendale Phase 2.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. The revenue sharing was used to pay for it because we obviously didn't sell the numbers of lots required to do that. And so now any sales of land, until we've paid back that amount back to the revenue sharing, it will just go into reserve.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
I see.
Okay. Councillor Sherrard, you had your hand up?
Yeah, and I believe my more of an answer. So actually, Hillendale Phase 2, we have no numbers how many lots we sold this
We
year?
sold one this last year.
One.
Has there been more interest since we made the adjustments to lot prices and the off-site levy program?
I don't think we saw a significant change in appetite there. We're going to continue, are planning on doing some probably late winter, early spring advertising and trying to generate a little bit of interest there. But I don't know if Councillor Sorensen has a feel for it from your space, whether that had any impact in.
Well, I think that one sale came right after that change in price.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's been a tough market this past year.
Yeah.
So,
Brutal.
yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
so, but I think what we can now just be more confident that it's just market conditions, not price issues or that type of thing. I do feel that it's positioned much better to be attractive. So
The year before we didn't sell any, so it's like 100% increase.
Yeah.
no, we sold one the year before.
Oh man. Okay.
Year before that, none though.
Okay. Councillor Wilkinson.
Yeah, just through the chair, I thought we made accommodations for one construction company to do a variation in the way they had to build the houses without the garage. Nothing ever came of that.
No, we did make those changes, but it didn't materialize in. I shouldn't say that. The one home that was built, I think, did take advantage of some of those changes in terms
Okay.
of size, but it hasn't generated a lot of additional activity, I think, as we can see. But
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
All right. FCSS.
CSS. Right, so there's been a few minor trivial adjustments in that column. So we'll pop right over to the optional column. There's a $15,000 ask there for actually a grant for the elder abuse. I believe they came and spoke to council about the province removing funding for that. Was that the case with that, Jim?
Correct. So it was a pilot project originally funded by the province, and that is now coming to an end. It's a 3-year project. You recall Charlene Zatar came and spoke to council. So that her work is basically coming to an end. She was based out of Hinton, and there was a proposal that if she was to continue doing what she would do, the cost would then be put on the municipalities that are part of this region. The $15,000 would be our portion of that. And
I believe we pay that to Hinton, and they would be administering the program from there.
correct.
We can.
I think Jim. This was great when it was funded by the province, maybe obviously a little less attractive when it becomes a burden on taxation for our community directly. With the other mechanisms we have in place, such as the 211 and our own kind of internal services, I think we're comfortable that we provide access to the resources to deal with the elder abuse. This would certainly be, again, an enhanced or an additional level of service, but I'm not sure that we would feel that it is filling a critical gap that we experience in our community. But Jim, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, that's correct. I'm more confident in assigning the money to objectives we control directly within the town itself. I think that the best value for tax dollars at this point is to not support this ask.
Okay. Councillor
Through the
Wilkinson.
chair, sorry to have to disagree with you, Jim, but I think we're paying a small portion for a great service. And I think a real person in that who actually has a relationship with seniors and the seniors that are having the abuse or knowing of the families where to be looking for places to offer a service, I think it's an enhancement, again, that our community needs.
Okay. Councillor Chouinard.
And our cost is what? That's the total
15.
40,000 or what?
15.
15.
Oh, so it's the 15,000 would cost us to, 15,000 per year to take over the shortfall of the province not funding it, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
I think it's a part-time position, right?
I think
Or
that
was
is.
before.
Yeah.
I think that's how it is arranged.
Councillor Byer.
Through the Chair to Administration, when we passed the last budget and we included an additional community service person, kind of call them outreach, I'm not sure what we were calling them at that time, did that not fall a little under the senior elder abuse plan? How do our services enhance or complement this?
Sure, so absolutely, you're correct. This person, this role is actually being filled by Ali Broder right now. So she's the FCSS coordinator, and her role is to engage with members of the community. In theory, for example, if a senior phoned 211 and said, I'm experiencing abuse of some type, this would eventually filter down to our FCSS, and Ali would be a point of contact to speak to this person and perhaps offer various things within the community that can assist them, be it RCMP involvement or some other type of involvement.
And I think further to that, that is the intent of that additional program, was to directly engage in some of these FCSS related items and Certainly, we can work with our community development department to incorporate an elder abuse effort inside that department.
Okay,
Go ahead,
thanks.
Councillor Byron.
Thanks. And to follow up with that, then how does the 211, when you look at all these the exchanges happening with our staff and the 211, how do they correlate? Or do they correlate?
So
communicate.
when somebody phones 211, depending on the type of call that is generated, there is a list of agencies and departments that can assist that person. If it's an after-hours thing, then the message would be left with the department for the next day to contact this person.
Mm-hmm.
If it's during work hours, then we'd probably get that fairly quickly and could communicate back to the complainant.
Yeah, so 211, they kind of triage whatever
Mhm.
the
Right.
experience is and then direct them to the best agency to address whatever issue or concern they're having. Some of those, our FCSS department is one of the resources that falls under those various categories.
Councillor Wilkinson
Through
and
the
Councillor
chair,
Curry.
the information entered for 211, all the agencies to get and everything, is again another job that's been put on the FCSS departments in the municipalities to keep that updated list with 211. So yes, the government offered it, but it still took a workload to the municipalities to enter all the data.
Councillor Curry.
Just through the chair, does this, so this 15,000, is it just Hinton and Edson that are putting in, and are they just now gonna be covering Hinton and Edson, or is the county putting in, and this is, like, what's the coverage area of this?
So the project originally was for Hinton, Edson, Yellowhead County. And to continue as is, our portion of this project cost moving forward would be $15,000.
And then what does that, it continues to give us the same service?
That's how I understand it.
Okay, Councillor Chouinard.
Then one more question, has Hinton and Yellowhead County, or it's too early to tell if they're interested?
I'm assuming that they are going to have the same asks for their council. I'm not sure where they're at with them though.
So it's kind of hard to say now, because if we say yes and they say no, or vice versa, then all three parties would have to say yes to make it happen then?
Yeah. Having it in the budget doesn't mean we have to expend it, right?
Okay, then I guess I feel like let's put it in the budget and then we'll wait and see, then we can debate. And we're better off to have it in and take it out if not needed than to not have it in. Because it's not a huge amount, but there is importance behind it.
Councillor Sorensen.
Based on administrator's recommendation and the increased outreach position that we've hired, I would be fine with not funding this line item for next year.
Councillor Byron.
I'm also in the same position. If we're already providing this service and we did increase our budget last year to really enhance this particular service, I feel that it is already being supplied to our residents.
If I can comment, in my letter to the minister, I stated that, you know, we are already funding 211, which frankly should be a responsibility of the provincial government, and I asked for them to step up to help us with this. Obviously they've declined, and I honestly she didn't even answer the questions in the letter back to us. So I am not in support of funding this. I think 211 is a much better service, and the services that we're providing through our community services department. Having said that, if our regional partners decide to go forward, then I would be open to being a good regional partner and being involved in that for this small amount of money. But at this point, I'm not in favor. I think it's more government downloading.
Okay.
Any other comments? Okay.
Okay. Move on further down the column to the 25,000 under the grants to individuals and organisations. This is an ask from the Boys and Girls Club to increase their grant by $25,000. Again, I'll hand that over to Jim for a bit more background on that.
So I think all of council was involved in some correspondence with the Boys and Girls Club, and we saw the same ask we did. We did have a follow-up meeting with the director. Coming out of that meeting, it was unclear as to where those monies were exactly going to be expended. We all know now that there is a daycare functioning out of the Boys and Girls Club. It's administration's position that because of the lack of clarity that are able to fully support what they're asking for. We also know that they did increase their after school care fees, and they sort of implied that all these cost increases were due to the minimum wage going up. It's just not clear enough for us to throw support behind it at this point in time. We give significant amount of funding to Boys and Girls Club, $40,000 a year. We give them approximately $21,000 to $23,000 in kind work, not necessarily in work, but through the use of the building, Griffiths Park, the maintenance, the utilities, those types of things that go on in that space. We charge them a nominal fee for rent every year, approximately $4,800. So all things being said, we're giving them roughly $60,000 a year to maintain the Boys and Girls Club. Until such time as we get more clarification on budgeting, I just think there's better value for tax dollars being spent elsewhere at this point in time.
So what are we looking at for an increase there, 25,000?
That's the request. Yeah.
That's the, I thought the
So it goes
request was
from
for like,
40 to 65.
oh, okay. Okay. Councillor Bevan?
Chair of the Ministry, did you not get a breakdown of what they were asking for the $25,000 extra? Because I have seen a breakdown of everything right up to the 25,000 or more of you know, what they were asking for, and that was sent out to us in that
There was a breakdown that was provided, but it was unclear what the additional positions would be doing. It was also unclear what the breakdown would be for those positions between current level of service and the new daycare that is being run.
I think I recall looking at that breakdown in last year they had 3 or 4 teen programmers. I think that's what they call their positions, and in the next year they had 7 or 8 teen programmers. And so it was a request to run more programs, basically. And I think administration's position is simply that if town council was going to invest $25,000 in additional youth programming, that we would be very happy to have that in our community development department, where we certainly have a lot of opportunities to engage and provide programming for the young people in the community as well.
Councillor Byer?
Through the chair to administration. So right now with the Boys and Girls Club, is it free for the teens then afterwards to go and drop in, or are they charging?
I think it depends on the program. Many of them are free, I believe, drop-in type events, and others, such as the after-school care, and are a fee-based service. But it depends on the program.
Okay.
So they do have teen drop-in, and it's fairly well attended, and that's part of the core funding that we currently provide. You know, part of the required funding stream for them. It's not over and above.
Okay, Councillor Bevan?
to the administration. It is free, but when you drop in the teen program down there, they supply the food for them or the snacks or whatever you want to. So it is costing the Boys and Girls Club to provide that to the teens, so they just don't come down and run wild or whatever, and that there is structured for them, and you can sit down and have say chips or pop like any other teen program, like white court offices and stuff like this and that. So they do supply to them, which does end up costing them. And I think the biggest thing there is, if you got that report that came out to us, they did show that because of the wage increase, how much they had to go up for different leaders in there. So they had to end up adding another $2.50 to a level 1, another $2.75 to the level 3 sort of deal. They had to take that increase and put it towards that, so that really impacted their bottom line on their budget and stuff like that. So the wage increase definitely hurt the club down there really bad, and they're looking at least a $30,000 more, you know, where they got to go out and find through grants or we have a great community here that stands behind all our organizations, and they are stepping forward too, but it's still a $30,000 loss because of the increase in wages here and that.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Curry.
Sorry, I was just trying to look back to see some of that detail. Was detail given on, you had mentioned that they increased the cost of using them?
User fees,
Yeah,
it's my understanding they have gone up. I don't have the exact figures.
okay. And then some of this 25,000, just looking at that past ask, was so that they could increase the teen programming. So it's not a necessity, it's a, am I getting that right? That, so it wasn't just a necessity, but this was so they could, so this 25,000 includes increasing?
I think that's one of the points that Jim is suggesting, that we lack some clarity on that.
Okay.
$25,000 for the change in minimum wage that's a lot of hours of minimum wage at $2, 15,000 hours, that's 12 full-time people getting a minimum wage increase. And so that we're just not quite sure what the impact is or where it's coming from.
Just a point on the drop-in, the youth drop-in. We find from the events we run compared to the events of the Boys and Girls Club, and I just want to be clear that we value what the Boys and Girls Club stand for, what they do. We want to continue supporting them with core funding. At this point, because of what we're seeing in the community with the amount of children and youth that are at risk, they need a different space than what the Boys and Girls Club can provide. Unfortunately, the Boys and Girls Club has a stigma attached to it that it's for little kids. We're not always able to tap into the youth that may be at risk, that are looking for a different space to occupy and not go to the Boys and Girls Club and feel like they're little children. We are proposing another option and are requesting some funding for that in a different
Couple of
area.
slides.
And then that's going to meet some different needs that the Boys and Girls Club model isn't.
Councillor Sorensen.
I would be comfortable supporting an increase to their grant based entirely on the cost of minimum wage increase. So if we could calculate that, then I'd be in support of that number. But this is like a 60% increase in their grant request, and it'll become the new norm, and before long they're over 100 grand, and they're in our major category pretty soon.
Councillor Curry.
I would echo what Councillor Sorensen said about the actual increase, but increase for current services. Just when I'm looking at that letter, there seems to be adding services. And just some clarification, is there any other organization of this type that we provide funding for like this? Are they the only one in the community?
In terms of
Just-
youth programming?
Yeah, youth programming, and like I guess it's the only after school, because we don't provide any support for the daycares or the Brighter Futures or any of those that provide some.
No, and I think our support is generally not for those programs. It's for the other kind of more youth-based kind of community programs. I think it's not our intention to support the childcare aspects of what the Boys and Girls Club does. And I think that's one of the reasons it's a little challenging to separate where those pieces are falling in there.
I guess that would be my request. I need better data. I need better resource of how this money is being spent, just because talking about it continually increasing, but also knowing there's many organizations in our community that provide different services, and making sure that what we're providing is what we should be providing. So just more where the funds actually goes.
Thank you.
Breakdown of that.
And we did have that discussion with the executive director about we wanted more clarity as to where the money was being spent. I think a lot of organizations come to the town of Edson with a number in mind, thinking this is going to sustain them, but they don't necessarily know the implications this has on taxation. They don't understand that, one mill rate is equal to so many hundreds or so many thousands of dollars, and they just think it's there for the taking, but it's really not.
So, just a clarification, according to the letter from the Boys and Girls Club, the minimum wage is going to cost them just over $28,000. That's according to their letter to us. So, that's what they've said. So that, to your point, we're not even with this dealing with that. So
But I guess to mine that's 28,000 for all of what they're programming. And that's my question is, what is our ask of when we give out grant funding? What is the ask of for reporting back to us how funds are spent based on what they're getting asking it for?
So the contract we have with the Boys and Girls Club is that they're to provide us their financial figures once a year, so that we can go through them and ensure that, they're meeting some standards of transparency. We've looked at these numbers. I don't think there's anything wrong with them. I think they're certainly within the range of what we would expect them to be.
Thank you.
Councillor Bevan.
Through the chair. Also, you said, with the daycare, but you have to realize that the people that are working at the daycare not only work at the daycare, they also work in the club itself. So they're doing a split duty. So we have one lady there, or they have one lady there that completely looks after the daycare, but you have to have a certain level of being a daycare, and they all got to work to their level 1s and that, and we got one level 1, the other ones are level 2s. So they all take a turn in a daycare, but they all come back out to other programs throughout the other 12 months of the year and stuff like that too. So I mean, they are working multiple jobs down there.
I just, if I may add, I just really have concern with that $28,000 number. I just got to really reiterate, that's 14,000 hours at $2 increase an hour. That is like a lot of hours. I don't know how many staff they have, but I just don't understand how, unless they're adding additional staff, I'm not sure where that financial burden is coming from. But.
Go ahead.
Through the chair to administration, I'm just trying to gather my train of thought here. Does the Boys and Girls Club offer any, or does the government offer the families that use the facilities after school any type of discounts on wages? Like I know before the $25 a day daycare was at the Edson daycare. If you made below a certain threshold, you got a grant, so you didn't have to pay as much for childcare, and the government supplemented it. Do you know if there's anything like this going on for this? Because the government is the one who increased the minimum wage and now have to pass this burden on to organizations like this? Are there any types of programs?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
Yeah, no.
It's my understanding they're not eligible to be a $25 an hour or a day's or a daycare yet, but they've made the applications to.
Okay, but for the teen side of it, like not the daycare, like that. Like I'm just using it as an example, right? Like if the daycare had that before the $25 a day program was implemented. Is there anything like that for lower income families that are using the teen after school or youth drop in?
I'm not aware of that.
Okay.
Through the chair. Stuff like that or not, but if the kids that come to the club, they do get subsidized by the government.
Yes.
And that, but not for teen or anything like that. So the other kids, they come if they can't, say it costs them $100 a month, if they can't afford it, then the club applies for a subsidy for them, and they'll get, only have to pay, say, 25% of it. The rest of it is covered. But for the teen program, no, there's nothing like that, and that, I know the Boys and Girls Club would like to have a member sit on the youth interagency to help them out and better get our teens into the youth interagency and put on a lot of stuff with them and that. So they would like to go that route too, and they realize that down there they are limited. So they'd like to be able to have a member sit on that board so they can plan and help them and have the teens to go up and be more involved with whatever's going on in town in that age.
Councillor Chouinard.
Okay, actually hearing the comments, and I have to agree with Jim, we need clarification, and I would be in favor of, increasing their budget just to cover the extra cost. Like I said, minimum wage is the true, to keep service the status quo. But, I mean, I can't find a lever, but I remember reading it, they were increasing services. So to keep them status quo, yes, I'd be interested once we get the information to keep them up, because that was a cost that affected everyone. So it's something out of their control.
Any other comments? Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair, I just like to comment really what a great thing the Boys and Girls Club is. In any town that it's situated, it does help the low-income people, and we need that service. I do think maybe we need more clarification, that's all, and I do support to change the difference in minimum wage.
Yeah, and I think as Jim suggested, I think the town has been a very strong supporter of the
Yes,
Boys and Girls
thank
Club for
goodness.
many years.
Mhm.
$60,000 plus
Mhm.
is a very significant commitment to them and their program, and I think we've demonstrated our interest in supporting what they stand for and what they do. But I think there's all limits to everything, and
But I think it's
I caution. I'm just worried about getting into the same situation we find ourselves in with the Recycling Society, where they do all these many great things, but we're just not sure what we're paying for or what part of what we're paying is going to which programs. And at the Boys and Girls Club, where they have these paid programs and paid services, and then we're making contributions, we're just seeking those clarifications to make sure that when we're funding them, it's specific to the shared objectives and the shared programs that we're looking to achieve together.
Okay, I'll give my 2 cents here, and then I'll hand it over to Councillor Byer. Having been involved with the Boys and Girls Club, I truly believe in the work they do. I also know that sitting on the board that when I was there wasn't a realization of exactly how much the town was supporting in kind through the building. We pay all the utilities, and the rent that they pay don't even come close to covering those costs. And as we know, with carbon tax and everything, those are costs that are going to be borne by us. So there will be additional support, I'm sure, that way over the course of the year. I am concerned they have launched their daycare program. I don't want a single town penny going towards that program. We have other organizations such as the daycare and the Friendship Center that provide those same programs that we don't provide support for. And I'm really challenged with that large of an increase. We don't provide funding for minimum wage increases for other organizations in our community. I'm not opposed to seeing a little bit of an increase just to help them out a little bit more, but I'm challenged with the $25,000 number. And I also know that when I was on the board previously, there was a great hesitation to increase rates. And when you looked at it, we were way below other communities. Other communities did have zero municipal support. So I would like some information and see how the rates have increased and how those compare to other communities. And then once we have that information, maybe be able to come to a better number that I'd be more comfortable with. At this point, I'm not comfortable with a $25,000 increase until I get that information. So
May I also suggest, I think wherever possible, it's better to reflect the true numbers, as in if it would be better to charge them an actual rent and then increase the grant that we're already paying to show that, so that when we're talking about it and when they're looking at it, they can understand that a little clearer and a little better. That's something we can approach in the future as well. Instead of having that $20,000 kind of happening in the background, we can try to make it more present by just saying, no, we're actually going to charge you $25,000 rent instead of $5,000 rent, but offset that with the increased grant, so at least they're seeing those true costs reflected a little bit better. That may be something to happen down the road, but I do think that's something that can help with the clarity that we're looking for.
well, and I think there could be some benefit in doing that because a number of grants will not apply to wages nowadays, but they will apply to rent and that sort of thing. So they could apply those grants to the rent, and then they could take our money and apply it to the wages. I think that's worth administration having a discussion with the executive director to see if that might be a benefit as well. Councilor Byer, sorry.
No, totally. Thank you. Through the chair to administration, thanks, Mayor Zahara, for that. You certainly summed up what is foggy in my head. I am not comfortable with the $25,000 increase, and for what the reasons that Mayor Zahara said, as well as that, you know, if they're implementing the daycare out of there and we're providing them very low rent, how that reflects with the other organizations in town, as well as Jimmy mentioned something else later on in the day that you were going to bring up. So I would like to maybe table that $25,000 and see what.
I think I've heard general support for not until there's additional information provided.
Yes.
Is that, I think, the general feeling?
Yep.
Yes, thank you.
So.
Yep.
Can I just add to that?
Sure.
Do we have a clear statement that the town is only funding youth programming there?
There is an agreement, Jim. Would you feel comfortable that it clarifies and specifies what we're funding and what the grant covers?
Oh, Councillor Curry?
And just maybe through the chair, Jim, just when I'm looking back at this charts that were sent to us from them, just some clarity, because the first chart that they gave to us was based on what the funds were spent on, based on, it was the team program, the coordinator, all that. But then the second chart for the ask includes all the leaders and everyone involved, which to me then is now we are paying the increase for all programming occurring, and that's not what was in the grant. So I would like to see this in a chart form of what is the real for exactly, because I can see already, you can see like one of the wages had to go up to 25, but for a lot less hours then. So I'm confused about what the grant was spent on. We have a chart, and then we have a new chart that includes a heck of a lot more people in it.
Yeah, and I think this goes back to, I think Councillor Wilkinson, as she suggested, is these groups and organizations are all just trying to provide good service and good programs in our community, and it's not fun or enjoyable to have some of these conversations, but I think we just, they become unsustainable really, really quickly unless we manage them really effectively. And I think that's more what we ought to consider this conversation, is an attempt to ensure sustainability of these really, really important service providers in our community.
Agreed, 100%.
Through the chair, I think you're exactly right, sustainable, but not in competition. Like we have satellite daycare where there's providers with
Absolutely.
25 years experience. They're gonna have a hard time getting people in to babysit when there's $25 daycare elsewhere. So I don't think that that's up to us to subsidize the daycare.
Yeah.
I don't. That's a different kettle of fish than mine.
Yeah, and I think too, it becomes really, really problematic when we are subsidizing the rent and then they're engaging in competition with other organizations. That becomes really challenging for us.
Competition is not a good thing.
Okay.
I think that's good enough feedback for us on that.
And so we're removing it until
For now,
we have more information, and leaving the 15 in for now. We can always revisit it after. All right, so moving on. Parent Link, this is actually linked with FCSS. I could have put those together. So just a separate grant we get from Parent Link, and it goes towards our FCSS programming. So,
Virtually no change there, I don't think there's.
and no, there's just a little change in the grant amount, that's all, but really no change in how it's administered at all. What we call public transportation is the grants we give to organisations that provide transport, like the Seniors Bus, McMahon and Scope. They also have buses that provide transport for their individuals. Again, no change from the previous year on those grant amounts that we have.
This does not include the in-kind stuff that we provide? Like
yes,
insurance?
It does. The 41 includes the
okay.
grant to the seniors and also the cost of providing we pay for their gasoline and we pay for their insurance. This has been covered fairly well in past years, so I haven't adjusted this due to the gasoline costs going up, because they haven't really reached the amount that we've put in there. They may this year.
I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but we will be bringing forward a report to council recommending that they approach Seniors Transportation Society, asking for one of the council members, as discussed at the organizational meeting, to be a participant, at minimum an observer, and hopefully a full participant on their board.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really critically important. I think this is going to be a growing pressure in our community, and having that linkage, I think, will be very important moving forward. So, Councillor Wilkinson.
I'd like to just reiterate that it is so important at our FCS, at our Evergreens Foundation strategic planning. Transportation became a huge issue, like in Jasper, buying a bus through Evergreens Foundation, etc. So transportation, I think, can just be an empty bucket that we just keep dumping into.
Yeah.
So we need to watch this.
Okay.
Let's move on to Community Services Administration. So this is the administering of the office, the sort of overseeing of community services. You see just some minor adjustments there in the trends. Obviously the major one there is the personnel. What we've done is we've moved the community development personnel over into the community development page, which is the next page. So there's a drop here, and then it's actually gone up on their page. So it's again just one of those reallocations, which is why it's always good to look at that as a whole rather than individually. The optional column over there, this is actually the introduction of the Youth Council. We had I think a $10,000 grant that's not being used anymore. that we are going to use for the $6,000 for the bursaries, and then the rest of that was just allocated to contracted services. You know, if we're going to buy food for events and things like that with the youth council. The impact on taxation is the 6,000, which is the amount that would be moved from the bursaries into a reserve to be paid out when that person leaves high school and goes on to their further education. I think we were supplying $500 a year per member. So they would then come back to us after they leave high school and show they're enrolled in further education, and then we would give them that bursary from that reserve. But we need to put it aside for the future.
Any questions, comments?
No, I think just to be clear that I think council obviously spoke very strongly in favor of the youth council. It is currently shown as optional. You'd like to see that incorporated into the budget.
I'm just wondering with the bursary program if there's an opportunity to partner with local business where maybe they also kick in some money and we could make even more attractive. I know I've spoken to some professional organizations in our community and they're struggling to get employees in certain areas, but maybe there's an opportunity to partner with them to do something like that in the future. Just something to keep in mind.
Sorry,
Yeah.
just to straighten it out, when they leave high school, they have to be enrolled in
Post-secondary?
any post-secondary, they can be in a training.
That's my understanding. Is that
It's a pretty broad. It's a pretty broad
Good.
educational.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that PEGA, they're very good through education and
Yeah.
professional engineers. I bet they throw in some dollars.
Okay.
All right, so moving on to community development. As you can see, the personnel amount has now been moved over to here. If we go to the optional column, the 25,000 listed there is a, it's gone. Jim, I'll hand it over to
The
you.
youth shack.
Thank you. I was there a minute ago and then it just went out of my head. For the youth shack in Kinsman Park, for that to be done up as like a drop-in centre for youth.
And many of you will remember that shack has been a scout shack for many, many years. This summer, we've taken it back from scouts because that scout group folded. You'll notice we put a roof on it with some help from the community. It's been painted on the outside. That is a youth-driven paint scheme that they designed. Maddie Sharman and Allie did a lot of the installation on that. We are hoping that we can turn this into a teen drop-in center. There is a schematic that my department has prepared with how this concept can look inside. New furniture, paint, flooring, that kind of stuff. There is a furnace in there. There's no plumbing, mind you. That's another project down the road if this thing moves forward. But the hope is to have programming there, to have leaders there that can engage the youth into offering programming and have a space for them to come and hang out and be teens.
Councilor Sorensen.
So the washroom facilities would be the Kinsman bathroom?
Correct.
I see.
Do those get turned off in the winter, Jim?
No. No, they're on timers all year long. We just adjust the time.
Okay. Any other questions, Councilor Bevan?
So if you wanted to put all the plumbing and everything else in, that'd be an extra expense to run all the lines and everything over there into the sewers and stuff like that.
It would, correct.
Next year.
We have some preliminary project costs on that. We would have to go under the old Greek Orthodox Church. It's Greek Orthodox. Russian, sorry.
Russian, yeah.
But that, yeah, because the main line is on that street, so we'd have to go under that property.
I also think there's trouble with adding a bathroom into that building.
Yeah.
It's small, small enough to
They
begin
do
with.
have
You
washrooms.
start to add a bathroom or two bathrooms, and suddenly
It can
it's
be.
just a closet. So,
Well, then, yeah.
For the time being,
I think this is more intended to be kind of a, if I may, a short or medium term kind of solution, making a $25,000 investment creating the space, but I don't think it's worthwhile considering that space as the long-term home for the youth drop-in, but it's something that we can try to utilize in the short or the midterm to create a space for some young people to spend some time.
One of the ideas floating around is that it would also be used as a community hub for block parties, community connectors, community leaders to meet with their block association, so to speak, and just have that facility there. We already have requests for people to have parties in the park. Last summer,
We rent it out for birthday parties
Right.
and support, if the weather's not good, then they have somewhere they
Have
can
a
go inside.
barbecue
Yeah.
inside or something.
So we got Councillor Bevan, Councillor Curry, Councillor Chenard, and then Councillor Byer.
All the way around.
Through the chair. No, I like the idea where it's going, it's a temporary use, and I think with a new multiplexer building, we can move our teens up there and use more of that facility up there, which we wanna really promote and get everybody in the community coming up there and that, and to have other groups go in there and use it, I have no problem with that. I think it's a good idea. I think we make use of what we got, and it's a beautiful building now. If we have to put a little bit of money into it to keep it up for all the residents in Dundee, and even for the visitors coming to town, and that if we have something going there, they stop, they can see what we got. It enhances our facilities down there and everything, so I think it's a good idea.
Councillor Curry.
I think it's a great idea for a teen drop-in. I know that that's on every survey we've done, every conversation we've had with the youth, this comes up. They are programmed out and beyond. They don't need programming, they just want a place to hang. And knowing how well the library does and its location to the schools, I think it's really good. My only caution would actually be making it into a community space. Because then that once again takes away the purpose. Youth don't, as I know it's terrible to hear, guys, but they don't want to hang out with us. And a big part of what we have with the youth is they don't have a place that feels like theirs. It doesn't feel like theirs. And I would just caution on where we're using that, how that's using, because all of a sudden it's the same reason why we struggle to have them go to the Boys and Girls Club, because it's where little kids are. So all of a sudden, if you're creating a space that is great for, toddlers to have birthday parties in and such, it's no longer a space where youth want to be. So I just would caution that it not become this, used for every other thing, that we're actually allowing it to be a space that youth want to be in, which sometimes looks different than a space that would be, good to rent for a birthday party. A birthday party and a youth hangout space don't look the same.
I would suggest that our youth council maybe should give some direction as to what they'd like to see and if this would be appropriate. So, Councillor Chenard.
Where you talk to teen drop-in center, would that involve staffing or just an open building or someone to coordinate programming out of the building?
We would have staff there and or volunteers trained to, when it's open for teen drop-in.
Right, that's
there would
what
be
I-
an adult there.
So would we have to hire new staff or do we have staff we can
No, we
coordinate?
have
around?
staff that we would man from our department.
Oh, okay, so we have staff, it just matters saying, okay, you're over there instead of over here. Okay, thanks.
Okay, Councillor Byer.
Through the chair to administration, most of my comments has already been mentioned, that if we make it a space where other people can rent it, then it's not quite the space available for teens, especially if we allow people to rent it while the teens would normally be there, then it kind of closes the door to them. Not that there isn't a need for those spaces in the community, but just wanted to point it out.
Okay, anybody else? Councillor Sorensen, Councillor Wilkinson.
Maybe I agree that for the next 2 years it'll be maybe a youth drop-in area, but maybe have the vision long-term it's a block party or a park community hall area that could be used. So maybe 2 years from now we have to switch it over to something else.
Councillor
To
Wilkinson.
the chair, in the meantime, I think whatever you need in there, put an order in it, take it or leave it, because they really get great things in there, TVs, video games, old couches, and then the teens can just enjoy themselves without somebody sitting worrying about what they're gonna wreck, just have something. I know that they'll wreck it, but
Yeah.
they're
No,
rough.
I know.
They're rough, so.
I got
just
a
let them
huge
enjoy
collection
it.
of DVDs if anybody's
Good,
interested.
perfect, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not sure they'll know how to work those.
Old school DVD.
Whatever they want.
So I think certainly we can spend more time talking about the program and the specifics. At this point, I think we're just hearing support for the budget, which is
Make sure it includes Wi-Fi.
appreciated. What's that?
Make sure it includes
Wi-Fi.
Wi-Fi.
No, this is a electronic free zone.
Well, they can huddle
No
up
one will
against
be
our
there.
condo and pick it up there.
Wi-Fi, Janet Wilkinson. What's your
Donated
password?
by-
It's very complicated. Well, I don't mind, it's short.
Parks and facilities maintenance.
I'm just saying, this is one of these initiatives where we're looking to fund from the revenue sharing, because it is, or our portion of it from the revenue sharing, it will be cost sharing with the county
Yeah.
as well.
Good.
So I just wanted to point that out. Parks and facilities. Within the trends and adjustments, you'll see a large drop there of 795,000. It's because at the time of the last budget, we were able to confirm the amounts for the bike park and the amounts for the ag complex that we were talking about earlier. So they've been moved, as well as the 45,000 that was moved from here over to economic development for the beautification grant for the businesses. So that also came out of here. And you can see below we had funded all of that from reserves, and so that has now also been removed. So the changes parks have listed is 20,000 under their contracted and general services. This is from taxation, and this is for enhanced service for Vision Park. So now that we've taken over Vision Park, they're requesting a little bit of extra funds there so that we can sort of have upkeep of that park as well as the current ones that we were doing. So if there's any discussion on that, or questions on that for Jim.
So what would that include? What kind of work would that include?
We're looking at some different models. Meeting with the ball groups on Monday, just as a follow-up from this season. We know that ball is moving out there in all forms. We're not going to provide as much service to to Griffiths Park anymore. It'll still be available so long as that site isn't selected for anything else. So all ball will be at Vision Park. That being said, we have to do some modifications to the diamonds to allow for baseball. We have to also provide services to all the different ball groups that play there every week. That's going to mean some changes to how they operate their organizations. But it also means that we're going to probably be looking at providing different tiers of service for different diamonds. That's not to say we're going to have 24 immaculate field of dream quality diamonds. We may have various types of grading of diamonds where we have premier diamonds, where we have, for A-ball and all the way down. Maybe we'll scale it back to 16 diamonds, a dozen diamonds. We're not quite sure yet. We have to do a lot of thinking over the winter and looking at other communities and seeing what is out there. There isn't a community out there in Alberta that has 24 awesome diamonds like we do. I think it made a lot of sense when we had the tournament here to have that many diamonds, but when we look at the type of tournaments that we're getting, even with the Indigenous tournament from the US that came up, they only used a handful. They didn't need 24. So even if we scale it back and take 8 away that we're not going to make immaculate all the time, but they'll be available for people to go practice on, or rentals for family picnics if they want to use those ones. We get a lot of that, a lot of requests for barbecues and, can we have this? Can we take that? Can we go here? People also have to be aware that it costs a lot of money to upkeep these diamonds. We have to repair a lot of damage that is done to the surface of the ball diamonds when people go on there before it's dry. If they play on it when it's wet, it drives the shale into the ground and the clay comes up, and we can't get it back. Shale is exceptionally expensive. We groom them and groom them and groom them, and it just, they're great when it's dry, but if it's wet and soggy, we had a really bad rainy summer for a while, and that didn't help ball. So that's where we're at, and it's expensive to maintain ball diamonds, but we're going to try and find a model that works for us, that is efficient and cost effective.
Jim, I see you didn't adjust the revenue side of that. My understanding is that you're intending to have minor ball pay to use those facilities where they haven't paid in the past. Is that accurate?
Correct. We're one of the only places, when we did do some research and some checking with other communities, because Minor Ball was using Griffiths Park, it's more of an open space, not a lot of maintenance goes into it, we didn't invest a lot of money, we didn't charge for the use of that. So moving forward, because of the model we're going towards, Minor Ball will be charged a fee for the use of Vision Park. It's not to say it's going to be extravagant, but it will be an increase to what they're used to, and they're aware of that as well.
Well, and if they're getting a higher level of service, that's a good thing too. So, Councillor Schneider, Councillor Wilkinson.
Actually, through to you, Jim, out at Vision Park, if we looked at, like, there is presently bathrooms and stuff, they're looking at, upgrade, I don't know what kind of shape they're in, but like to have proper bathrooms out there?
Yes.
Is
so
there a cost? There's gotta be a cost.
There is, you're absolutely correct. So we supplemented the bathrooms out there this season and part of last season with porta potties.
Yeah.
The main bathroom by the entrance, by the hangar, is in need of, it's gotta be torn down and replaced. There's nothing really good about it. Looks like it's gonna fall down. So we've had to shore it up, we've had to do some work to it to get it and to maintain it. Our hope is to replace that main bathroom facility next year. We'll see if the money turns up. The rest of the bathrooms spread out throughout the facility, most of them are okay. We have to do some grading around there because in some of them the water runs in and we get gravel all over them. One of them is always full of water because of how it's sloped. That's the one by the Premier Diamonds. So we basically shut that one down and put porta potties next to it because we can't pull the water out of it fast enough.
Right.
It just fills right up. It's like a well. It's actually not cracked in the bottom, but the water's flowing over the top of the lid, which is interesting. So, yeah, there's definitely some projects that need to be done to bring it up to a real good level.
But I think we're getting more, when we're talking about new bathrooms, that's more of a
Yeah.
capital
Yeah.
project. That's not an operational effort.
So for operations, we're talking about cutting the grass, the shale, just maintaining the cleanliness and the daily. And basically, we have one or two people out there all summer long cutting grass. There's that much grass. It's great.
Councillor Wilkinson.
Okay, through the chair. You were saying that we had to charge Minor Ball now. Are we jumping the gun and moving those ball diamonds away from Griffiths Park? If Minor Ball used them and they didn't have to pay, plus they were in walking distance for people to go to?
You know, from my perspective, I spend a lot of time with my kids playing baseball.
If I may, I think that's more of a programming discussion than a budget.
Oh, I thought it would
Question?
be budget to move them from one place to another.
Yeah, it's cheaper for us to move them out to Vision Park. It costs us more to keep them at Griffiths Park.
Okay, I was asking a budget question.
Yeah, okay. I know. I just wanted to
Alright.
make that clarification because
And on this then, it just seems unrealistic that we're keeping so many diamonds open if they're not being used, because it should sort of work out that they're not a 20,000 deficit.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, we have 30 ball diamonds right now in Edson,
Yeah. It's a bit
24 at Vision
ridiculous.
Park.
Mhm.
So we want to decrease that number so we can be more efficient and effective with the tax dollars to provide a great level of service on a reduced number of diamonds.
Mhm.
Councillor Byron, then Councillor Curry, then Councillor Byron.
Okay, I had it up in jeez. I've been waiting a long time.
I was actually hiding you.
He was hiding me. It was my fault. I should lean forward. So with this $20,000 and the changes you're planning to make, is the thought that it'll eventually even bring in more revenue, more people would want to rent them, whether it's like for family picnics, you know, those things, different tournaments, smaller tournaments, like is that a possibility of increasing
Absolutely.
revenue?
We have an opportunity to host provincial level baseball tournaments. Our diamonds don't meet the standard just yet for bantam, midget, pee-wee ball. Well, pee-wee probably yes. But if we could bring those teams in to have their provincial level tournaments, we could generate revenue, absolutely.
Thank you.
Councillor Byron.
Through the chair to administration. So before, a few years back, it's my understanding the Kinsman were operating the diamonds, they were maintaining the diamonds with cutting the grass and a few other things out there. Has anything been approached to Minor Ball to see if they're interested in taking over some of that, or is that something to be considered? As an in-kind deal? I don't know.
I personally feel like that's a bad idea.
Oh, okay.
We find groups and organizations are struggling to get volunteers and that type of thing. I think also it's a multi-user facility, so which group do we engage to do that? And also, yeah, it's a tremendous effort to maintain or to look after 24 baseball diamonds, and I'm not sure that would be placing Minor Ball in a advantageous position. Yeah.
And most people involved in Minor Ball are very busy on the road and helping out, just getting what needs to be done in town in terms of hosting games and coaching, and it's even hard just to find coaches. So I think I would agree with CEO Derek about that'd be very difficult. Councillor Bevan?
Through administration. So when they put the ball tournaments on there, whether it's Minor Ball or whatever and that, would you be charging the vendors also to come in there? Like the Minor Ball says we're going to put on a provincial tournament and we're going to use some vendors to come in and supply food and everything else. Would you also be charging the vendors to come in there to use that? Or would that just fall under the contract to Minor Ball? They're going to pay, say, $3,000, for example, pick a number. Would that just fall under them?
I think that's the model I'd like to see down the road. When we do set up the vendor area at Vision Park and have the water available and the power and whatever they need and the space, absolutely, I think a fee system is certainly reasonable. If they're going to be there making money on our property, we should get something for it.
I just wondered.
Yeah. Any other questions or comments? Okay.
I just don't know whether or not you want us to have that $20,000 in.
I would say
in the
yes.
budget or not.
I think that's with the amount of work that needs to be done out there. I think that's minimal. But I don't know what does the rest of council feel.
I'm in favor of 20.
Is it just repurposing the diamonds?
Basically, everything that needs to be done, grass cutting, repurposing, all those type of operational jobs, yes.
Councillor Curry?
I'm just, to clarify, is this going to be a continued 20,000? Yeah, that's where I have concerns, I guess, with it being a continued 20,000, if we're not gonna see an increase in revenue, for an increased 20,000 for one area. I see for this year, because we're starting this up and we're trying to build a new program and we're trying to bring in more revenue, but for future, if this is going to be a standing item on here, then I would need to see an increase in revenue for that increased service.
That's our goal, is to have a better revenue stream for that facility, and I think with Minor Ball going in there, we're going to be charging more for adult ball, tournaments, all this sort of thing. This year was sort of the watershed for us to sort of feel it out and not have too much of a shock on people using the facility, because they were used to either paying zero or doing in-kind work with the kinsman or some other deal. So we did this more as a bridging sort of measure.
Councillor Chenard, then Councillor Wilkinson.
Okay, actually through to Jim again. Okay, with the 20,000 increase though, bear in mind, if when we close the other diamonds or don't maintain them, there's gonna be a cost savings. So some of the staff, I mean, granted you're going from 6 to 24, but there's gotta be some cost savings of not maintaining the other diamonds. And probably not a lot, but there will be
Sure,
some.
I mean, it's still gonna be on the grass cutting rotation, we're not gonna remove it.
Right.
They will still cut the grass every X number of days. Are we gonna buy shale for it? No.
Yeah.
Are we gonna groom the diamonds? No. You're absolutely right.
Okay.
There will be some cost savings there.
Okay.
Okay, just for my input, like, parents pay money for hockey, and yet they still have to work the concession. So they do work in kind, so why not fix up some diamonds and have the parents cut the rest of them if they want to use them? And save some of this, 20,000's a lot.
Just for clarity, minor hockey parents don't work the concession. Ramsey has the concession.
Oh, okay, no.
Historically,
in other places,
that has happened, yeah.
Yeah.
But I think
exactly.
that's internal to minor hockey, or the organization.
I guess this
to subsidize
grass
their
cutting, though, is
fees,
just
but-
a huge, obviously a huge amount of money too. And for what, I guess, if we're not getting revenue back?
Yeah, to be quite honest, I think this is one that council will not be keeping when we get to the end of the list that you guys have said that you want to have in there. This is not one that's going to make the cut. I personally feel like we can accomplish the basic level of service with the existing budget. Does not mean enhancing the level of service, but I think we can accomplish the basic level of service with the existing budget.
Any other comments?
I'll move on to the 35,000.
Oh, Councillor Byers.
Sorry.
Through the chair to administration. So if we did increase the diamonds to repurpose them, so provincial tournaments or something like that could come in, then whose responsibility is it to bring those tournaments here?
Yeah.
Is it town because we've invested in the property, or are we relying on Minor Ball to hopefully make that investment in trying to get those tournaments here to bring in that revenue for the town?
I think that can be done by either party,
Oh.
right? And generally, if your facilities are really good, it kind of naturally happens that way. But towns also can actively go out and seek that type of thing as well. So,
Okay.
yeah. And my understanding as well as council has kind of before said that they weren't really interested in the town acting kind of in a business development sense in terms of attracting events or tournaments or those types of things to the facility.
Perfect for a chamber to do.
Yes. Or some other service group. Not one item.
All right, we're getting into the deadly discussion. The cemetery.
We've got one more to
We
finish
got
on
one
this
more,
one.
there's a 35,000.
Oh,
There's also
35,000.
Another optional one for 35,000. This was, I think, brought to council from FRMA, the Foothills.
Management, recreation, yes.
Oh, right.
So that would just be added to the budget if we were wishing to contribute to that initiative. Also from taxation, because it would be an ongoing.
Yeah. Go ahead.
So I've done a bit of research on that topic. Just as a reminder, FRMA stands for Foothills Recreation Management Association. And it's a group of companies and organizations committed to providing safe and affordable outdoor recreation opportunities in Alberta's foothills. So currently, Hinton and Yellowhead County are members of this. The association manages 15 campgrounds and 8 trail systems. I had a discussion with Yellowhead County and Hinton on this. They both are very supportive of this venture. Hinton pays $20,000 a year to this association. So 35,
That won't be that much?
no, I wouldn't do that much.
Okay.
Do around 20.
Around 20?
It's based on population.
Councillor Shadar and then Councillor Sorensen.
Okay, yes, I believe you're right. It should be about 20. And it's something that we can be into for a year. You know, we don't have to stay in it, so you can do it 1 year at a time. A lot of it is, it's very encouraging what they do, but it's the opportunities that come with this 20,000 where we had a presentation I believe is very important to us. And then so we can do it 1 year at a time, but that's the most important part, I guess.
Councillor Sorensen?
Yeah, from what I understand is our membership in this will open up some opportunities for funding, perhaps trails or some improvements to parks. So I think we'll get back whatever we put into this, and I'm in support of it.
Councillor Curry?
Through the chair, Jim, were you able to find out any dollar values from Hinton or Yellowhead County on things that they've supported in their own communities?
I have. So I spoke with the director, my counterpart Hinton. Currently, the FRMA is working with the bike park down there, and they're doing a significant investment in trails and that type of thing. I believe in the $300,000 range over there. So I mean, and that all fits their mandate. So they need to allocate funds to projects which must be trails or camping related, benefiting the user groups of the FRMA, and generally, you know, they need ideas to spend money on. Sometimes they come short of ideas. So I think in the end, this could benefit us.
Just based on the presentation that we had heard, and the comment that he had made that the money is based on locations, and Edson has its own fund that obviously has never been tapped into. I think this is huge. I think if we're trying to move our community forward with what we're doing at the Pike Park and trying to bring in the tourism and really making this a roadway that you really want to travel up the number 16, I think this is a way we could afford things like that trail out to Wilmore that we've been all would love, but is really expensive. I think the 20,000 to see if that is an opportunity to tap into those funds, and if we, after 1 year, find out it didn't work out that way, we can not continue in the membership.
Councillor Wilkinson and Councillor
Through
Barr.
the chair, I'm really in support of this, and I know this sounds awfully odd, but when we were looking at that bike park, I thought, oh, there should be spectator seating, you know, for the parents who come with their children to
For
watch.
heart attacks.
And, I mean, it's in a park, it might actually qualify, because it would be very expensive, but there's just so many opportunities that we could use it for, I think, so I'm very much in support.
And then we'll need L's. You know, heart attack, like first responders.
Exactly.
Yes, at the fire department. Councillor Barr.
Through the chair to administration, I'm in support of this. I think that because it's on a one-year term basis, that we can look at it after a year and see what those, what that turns out to be for a benefit for our community. I know we're all hopeful that we'll get, you know, some trail funding or something along those lines for our community, and I'm hopeful that that would happen. But it would also give our businesses a little bit of maybe like putting Edson on their maps, because that would also put our town logo and funding on their brochures and everything that they hand out at their campgrounds for people that are camping down there to realize that Edson is right nearby as well for business support.
Councillor Bell.
I do support this too. I think the same thing, that is, even if we get our money back or double it or whatever, you know, it takes off. We always ask on our business people for donations here and there to step up, whether it's with the man hours or whatever, and that, if we can get this here done, it'll benefit us wholeheartedly.
Okay. Just further to that, I agree. I'm in support. I do have a question though when it comes to, I forgot about this, two things. We've discussed some lighting within Hillendale. I don't know if that would be a capital, part of the capital discussion, a light in Hillendale Park. As well as when we did the tour over at the bike park, making sure we have washroom facilities available
Right.
for when it's open, because there's going to be a huge amount of people there, and I think we want to launch it in the most appropriate way possible. And I don't know, I haven't seen, there's probably a discussion in the capital portion about that.
Yeah, those are both capital items.
Okay,
but
so we'll
yeah.
discuss that in capital then.
Okay.
All right, moving on to cemetery then.
Yeah, you can see it.
There was
It's
really
deadly.
not a lot of change here, just based on that 3-year average for the personnel.
Okay,
Okay.
no questions?
You saying there's no complaints from there?
That's what
Just
dead-
a
it's
comment
dead
to the
quiet.
chair.
Quiet, yeah.
I've had a
Keep
lady
going with that.
inquire about getting little lighting out there, like little fairy lights, sort of a bit of music going, and she gave me a site out in BC. And I don't think it would hurt, I don't think it has to be expensive. I remember voting against the $180,000 lights in the park. But some lights in the cemetery, I don't think that'd be a bad idea. That would have to be a budget item, would it?
Yeah, I think that we would, administratively, we would just want to do some more research before we
Okay,
suggested costing or budget or anything for that.
okay, thank you for
But yeah, we
considering.
can definitely take a look at it.
Thank you.
Okay, public health care buildings, public health buildings.
Public health building, this is the budget we have for looking after the medical centre building and the doctor's rental house as well. This is another area where you see the taxation impact of that 200,000 offsetting taxes. So we're talking about the rent that we get from the medical centre just goes directly in to offset those taxes. So if any time that's stopped, we would need to bring the shortfall from taxes.
This is
So-
probably the one that I think is the most
It's
tenuous,
Yeah.
with, we know, the medical clinic being constructed at the hospital. There has been no indication that this is changing, but I do think this is a month-to-month kind of arrangement at this stage. And so if at any time in 2019 the doctors do decide to move, that's immediately $200,000 of lost revenue.
My comment is I think we need to start transitioning immediately. Whether it's taking $50,000 of that revenue and starting to put that into reserve. I just don't want to be caught with them being gone and then all of a sudden we need to find another 2% somewhere. If we can start to transition that would be, I think, appropriate sooner rather than later.
And we have spoken about that. Just to be aware, 50,000 would be 0.5 of a tax increase. So that's why it may be better to do it slower, or that's up to.
Yeah, but I think we need to start in 2019 because the runway is going to be pretty short on this. I think I'd be surprised if they're still there a year from now. So, Councillor Sorensen.
Can we ask for a 6-month lease or some kind of surety?
I believe our lease does have a 90-day window. Yeah.
But we can ask, right?
We definitely can. I think they would probably do it, but I spoke with their manager of the medical center just about a week ago, and her feeling is that there's not really any even active conversation going on right now. It's pretty quiet, and so they certainly will let us know if that changes or when that changes. But yeah, so yeah, I at this point I've taken the position of saying we're fairly neutral on this. This is aside from the impact it has on our revenue, but this really is we're, I don't know that we want to be a barrier from them leaving this facility to go over to the medical center. So we've been pretty open with them saying stay as long as you'd like, but also leave if it's the right thing for you. And so it would be a little bit of a change to go and say, no, we want you to give us a longer period of time, although I'm not saying it's impossible.
Or for that, rather than asking for a 6-month lease, maybe asking if you could extend that 90-day notification period to a 6-month notification period.
Yeah, I can definitely take a look at that.
Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair, I think just keeping the conversation open, just so we have a bit of a heads up, to me is enough.
Yeah, I reach out every
There's no
month. I
sense
reach out every
kicking them
month or
off.
so just to kind of get a
Yeah.
feel for where they're at,
Yeah.
and I think hard to say where that's going to
It's
go.
a lot of money.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Councillor Byram.
Through the chair to administration. So if they, within the 2019 year, moved on to the current hospital site, are there any other opportunities to get revenue from that building through other?
Well,
groups
it's
or
purpose
something
built
like
for a
that?
medical center, and so I would suggest it's pretty limited in its current form.
Okay.
Yeah, certainly we could take a look at it should that arise. Yeah, or even alternate usage to at least get some, utility out of it. But.
Okay, anybody
Sorry,
else?
just one more
Councillor
thing.
Wilkinson.
I do think in other towns they're making wellness centers, where they have everything under one roof, so there might be possibilities yet for it.
Yeah, we've definitely considered a number of different alternatives for if that building does become available. One of those is a community support center where all the various agencies, primary care network, things like the Friendship Center or others who are kind of scattered around now, if we can consolidate some of those agencies into one place, that it might be an effective use. So all things that we can consider should the doctors decide to
It's a good location.
Yeah.
Councillor Sherrod.
I would disagree. The 200,000, we have to plan for it, because we all know as this building gets older, it's a good possibility we may be using it for our own purpose, the medical center.
Almost no possibility.
Of us not using
Yeah,
that building.
when we
for
had the
our own.
architects come in and tell us, they suggested that building was
Not
not
good for
a
that?
good fit for
Okay.
too small.
Oh, the building, okay, because I just thought if we're using it for our own purpose, so we should, but I mean, we need to start planning. So we need
When I say our own
200,
purpose is
100.
not to replace the function of this building, but
Okay.
that doesn't mean that there's not alternative town-related functions that might go in there.
Something for town. So
Yeah.
what we could do, if it's 200, we should plan for this year at least 100,000. Because, I mean, I agree, this 200 is, at the very best, we have 12 months left. because the other building is complete, so we know it's inevitable, it's gonna happen. 3 months, 6 months, but we're within 12 months, they will be vacating. Would be something that we should plan for.
That's just a 1% tax
It's a
increase.
1% tax
No, I
increase.
fully
Okay.
agree, but at 200, we should even plan for 2019, 100,000, 2020, it's gonna be 200.
That's a 1% tax increase on top of that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay,
it's
I,
less money.
I think we can certainly add that to the conversation we have at the end, but we appreciate that, so.
Okay, Griffiths Park Complex.
Okay. So this is the Boys and Girls Club building. We call it the Griffiths Park Complex. So this is the amount at the bottom. You see that taxation impact that Jim was talking about, that we're also helping the Boys and Girls Club with by paying this instead of having them pay that in their rent. The rent is $4,800 a year. I think the gas bill alone is sort of 1.5 times that. So that's showing that offset between what we pay towards it and the rent that they pay to us.
I think we should just also make sure we clarify that there is a small space in that building that the town does use for some storage and as well. So it's not completely all. I would say the vast majority of the usage is in Boys and Girls Club. I just don't want that to be lost in the conversation as well.
Councillor Sorensen, Councillor Byer.
Further to what you said before, I would be in full support of leasing this property to them at market value and then granting back some funds.
It will have no
for
financial implications, but I think it clarifies the
transparency.
conversation. Yeah.
Yeah.
Councillor Byer.
Through the chair to administration, also with what Councillor Sorensen just said, I think that that's a good start to the conversation, and then if there are grants available on their end for the building, then it kind of helps them out in that regard as well. But my question was, the arena behind there, are there any plans for the arena, or are any changes needed to that?
I don't think we don't have any. Yeah, we don't have any current plans for any significant, just kind of business as usual.
Okay.
For the short term.
We have liners there for the ice surface now, so
For this
should help
year.
with ice this year, I think. So.
And it's really keep the water from flowing down the parking lot.
It's a good start.
Yeah. Councillor Byer.
Sorry, perhaps this was supposed to go on a different slide. Have we considered enhancing any of our other outdoor rinks to complement what the Boys and Girls Club or the Griffiths Park rink currently is in some of the neighborhoods?
Yeah, Jim can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think we have any current significant plans to make any adjustments or enhancements to any of those parks at this time.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? Okay, we'll move on.
Move on to Repsol Place. They're really kept everything fairly tight this year, sort of a holding pattern, I think, for Repsol Place. Just a few other things in the required column just to bring your attention to. We have some increase in rental there from the Aeros. It's going to give us a little more revenue there. And down in the expense part there, that is for the pool shutdown, which doesn't happen every year, but it is required to be happening in 19. So that's really the only changes there that from Repsol Place that came forward.
Okay, any questions, comments, concerns? No, we'll move on then.
Rec Complex.
I don't think we should really spend much time talking about this. We basically kept a little bit of an operational budget there, but we've also funded it from reserve. We're anticipating that this Tuesday, council will give the final determination on whether or not we proceed with demolition of that building. Should that go forward, we will require almost no operational budget for that facility, which is why we show it just almost completely coming, well, I should say almost.
Yeah.
We show it completely coming from reserves at this point. We don't anticipate there being any ongoing operational concern there.
So in the past, the revenue from that operating budget didn't come from reserve. So how's that money been absorbed into? Or we've taken the past operating costs of that building and are we going to be putting it into reserve?
Not for this year. This year we've decided to take it from the revenue sharing to have zero impact. So we're actually removing that from the costs that they've been in there in previous years.
Okay. That doesn't really answer my question. We
Sorry.
had, we had,
We're not creating an operational reserve for the funding of that
so
building
where did that 250 or whatever we were spending go? Where in the budget?
into the general.
Into-
So just
Costs,
overall.
yeah.
It's just been absorbed.
Okay, I have okay.
Go ahead.
I have a concern with that.
Okay.
I think the money that we are saving on the operation of this should be put towards our multiplex reserve for future operations. We are going to be building a multi-use facility. We are taking away a facility, and the money that we're saving from that should go towards our new facility in the future. That's my point of view. I don't think it should be
Makes sense with me.
I don't think it should be absorbed into other areas, because then that, poof, that money's gone. We were spending this money for a community facility, and I would like to see that money remain operating community facilities, whether that be the new facility or over the course of the next two or 3 years, keeping Repsol Place whole. But I don't want to see that money just being absorbed into other areas of our budget. Councillor Wilkinson
Through the
and
chair, I
Councillor
totally agree
Sorensen.
with you, because we're saying that we're offering something for that same service.
Yeah.
Well, let's keep the service, and I know this isn't a proper question, but are there flagpoles out there? Could they be saved for the Legion? Wally wants flagpoles, and he wanted them from Evergreen School, and that was too late.
I think Jim's already
Did you
aware.
talk to
Oh,
Jim?
Yeah.
I think he's aware of that. He's aware of that interest.
Okay, good.
When it comes time, I can speak with the contractor to see if it's even feasible to
Yeah, it just
remove them, because they're embedded in
seems
concrete. So
yeah.
I don't know what.
so sad if they're right there and they could just be used.
Yeah.
Okay.
Councillor Sorensen.
I agree that we should be preparing our budget for a major operating requirement for our new multiplex, and so slowly getting our public used to this kind of, we just can't let it get absorbed into other areas of the budget. But can you clarify this 186,000 in expenses? Will that be down to zero if we demolish the building in January? So there's 186,000.
Right, but the cost sharing element of it,
Right.
we wouldn't have
Right.
access to that.
So-
So it's only 65% of 180.
It's
So
the
it's about
120.
100 and
120.
sorry, about 120,000.
So we could move that to reserve. That will add to the taxation as well, because at the moment it has no tax impact. So if we move that 120, you're looking at, again, about 1.1 increase. for
So
that.
long as we demolish it in January.
Well, no, just talking, the demolishing wouldn't change the tax impact because we have zero on that anyway, based on this.
Right.
We were going to fund any costs at all that might happen next year
By
from a reserve.
Right.
But if you're wanting to move that 120 to a reserve, we have to budget for that, and to do that, we would need to add 1.1% to the taxes to do that, approximately.
And or eliminate $120,000 of costs somewhere else.
Councillor Chenard and Councillor Byer.
So actually, last year, I think we were working towards that, because we were thinking about doing something about it in the 2018 budget. So did we budget it in? So 2018's total cost, did we take that out of reserve, or was that budgeted in?
No, that was from taxation. If you
Right.
notice that the
Right, that's what I'm
2018
saying.
column, it had the tax impact of 160.
Right, but then if we back the clock up, it was averaging about $500,000 a year, which I agree, we need to start, when we were maintaining it, like when we had to increase windows and doors on the building. So you're right, we're not all of a sudden gonna knock the building down and we get a 5% tax savings. It's just we don't have to spend the money, so we were already working towards that traction.
Well, we've already worked over a number of years, that's been dropping, right? Once we
Right,
took it
it's
over,
been-
it dropped. So that's already been absorbed in previous
Yes.
years' taxation impacts. So we really just have to look at this one and what this one's going to do for us.
Well, that was my actual point, where people saying that, but it was already at that trend. A few years ago, when we said, okay, we're doing nothing, like we need to move on with the building, so we stopped spending, increasing, fixing up the building. So it's already too late, it's been absorbed, so what
To
you're
go,
saying-
to go back, if you're wanting to put 500,000
No,
now, instead that
and
would be a
that's what
5%, yeah.
Right, and that's what I'm saying, so we would start saving 500,000.
I would also suggest that a large portion of that 500,000 was capital related as well,
Yes,
which is
exactly.
partly a separate
Yeah,
conversation.
so it wasn't total maintenance, but it was a lot of capital.
I think certainly administration has no issue with that. I generally agree and operationally have made some considerations in preparing that. We're happy to consider that if council supports it in terms of the impact it has on taxation. That's not a problem for administration at all.
Councillor Byer.
Through the chair to administration, so this is obviously a really hard one because I think the right thing to do is to put it in that reserve so we have the money when we need it. But to increase the taxes is, for something that we're not spending that money on this year is also a challenge. Do we know what our potential expenses will be with operating a new multiplex based on some of the visits from the other multiplexes and what their relative general operations look like?
We haven't done detailed research on that. That is one of the elements of the current RFP we have out, is to give us back some information on operating expenses. So we anticipate to have that in the relatively near future. But yeah, it's also partly dependent on what actually ends up in the facility. In some ways, we anticipate that our current operational expenses are inflated with an outdated building with old systems and inefficiencies and those types of things, and so some of that will offset. There will be new revenue sources and new revenue streams with a new building, and so we're hopeful that the operating impact will be, we anticipate it will be manageable. I think there will be an impact, but I don't think we're talking about an additional $1 million of expense or anything like that. So.
Do you know when that information would be provided back from the consultant? Would it be before our budget's passed?
What's that?
Do you know when that information would be provided back to council regarding the?
No, I don't think we would anticipate having that before January.
Okay, Councillor Curry.
Same as Councillor Byer, I agree on the concept and smart planning. I also think though that 0% tax increases, and quite honestly on us, 1.9% tax increase has put us in a position where our hand is forced to make smart things, and I think if we're not careful and we make too many smart ones, we're going to have a ridiculous. So I think for me, I would like to obviously see it and that, but then where are we taking that from other places? And I think just in reality of tax increases in the past couple of years have put us in a position where we're going to have to make, this might not be the time that we can do this to be able to build back our reserves from the other spots. So I just think I also agree I would like to see that, but I also think that we're playing catch up from previous years in other departments, and I don't think people want a 10 or 12% tax increase in 1 year. So.
Okay. Moving on.
There's mud.
Yeah.
Well, the
Good
point
luck.
is, you're saying that we're playing catch up. But if we don't make that decision today, we're just doing the same thing next year and the year after and the year after. So I think when we come to the end of this, we have to make the decision, okay, well, we need one increased level services here. Well, maybe some of those things are gonna happen.
I think as well, when we say
right.
play catch up, I think it's problematic to think about doing that all at once. I think if we were to say, hey, 1% tax increase every year, we'll decide what our tax increase is going to be, and then we're going to add an additional percent, and that's going to be the quote unquote catch up. I'm not sure that's the perfect way to conceptualize that, but to cover off, we said we had that $800,000 of revenue that's iffy, and then we have a few other things that we want to accomplish, and that's just the reality of what we have to do, right?
Well, I'm surprised the medical center revenue was going into operations. I thought that would have been going to reserves, so, yeah. Councillor Schnurr?
Actually, the medical center, once it was paid off, because previous years we were paying it to pay the building off. And
It
it's
was
only-
being used to pay the debenture, and
Right.
then when that dropped off, it went into general.
And that wasn't very much, that wasn't that long ago, the building was just paid off.
16, I think.
Right, so it was there, because leading up to it, it was to pay the debenture. So that's how it ended up going in there.
Councillor Sorensen?
further to what you just mentioned, I've always I wouldn't say always, but last year I've advocated for increased what do you call it? Some kind of predictiveness in our tax rates for into the future. So if I would be fully in favor of saying that we're going to increase taxes by 1% above our baseline for the next few years, just to play catch up on infrastructure needs. And I think if you're open about that and you tell the public why you're doing it, then they'll get used to it and they know where it's getting used.
Okay. Moving on. Culture.
Culture, the museum, the library fall under this category here. As you can see, not a lot of change in the trends and adjustments. There is a required one there. That is the extra there that the museum have asked for because we are requiring an audit from them. So that is an extra expense for them. So I put that in the required column because we're the ones that have asked for that increase in there. Under the optional, the 27,300 is the museums ask for us to help fund the WAP May celebration, or that they came and I think I gave a presentation to council earlier in the year. So that's what that 27.3 is. Again, we have suggested funding that from revenue sharing. Definitely a one-off, non-ongoing operational cost, but again, it would come from that revenue sharing reserve to offset that.
Councillor Byer.
Through the chair to Sarah. I thought that what made presentation, I thought they were asking more around the $10,000 mark at that time from the town.
I think what they've done is they've asked for the maximum amount that they would need, but they're hoping to get some grants that would cover that. Councillor Curry, is that accurate?
Yeah, I can speak to that. So that is the max, so what they've asked of the town and the county, because they want to go ahead a lot of the planning for it. So there's some student funding, there's an arts and culture funding, but the grants, and they're confident in getting them, but they will not happen before decision making before this, like for our budget. So it would be, if they didn't get the grants, it would be post. So the recommendations was that they ask us for the full amount that would be needed if they didn't get any of the grants. So they asked the same amount from the county as they asked us, but the actual ask is closer to 10. If all the grants and such went through.
Right.
And just to know, this is also funded from a reserve, so it doesn't impact taxation. Or the recommendation is that it would be funded from a reserve.
Okay, any other questions, comments? Councillor Sorensen.
This one would be very easy for me to not fund this year, so I'll leave it at that.
Okay. I would disagree with that. They came to us, they did a presentation, we've indicated support, and this is not impacting taxation at all. It's coming from capital reserves, so I have no concerns personally. Councillor Chouinard.
I'd have to agree. They did come and we did say yes, so it'd be kind of late to say no.
Councillor Wilkinson.
I would say yes for 10,000, but even if it comes from reserves, it really does impact our taxation because there's less money in reserves next time.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Do what?
To what?
What you guys said?
10.
Do they only need 10?
They won't know until the grants.
Okay.
Yeah, they're not guaranteed to get all the grants they want to get, and they really want to go ahead with the project, and so they want to have the funding in place, and so they're basically asking the town and county to provide that backstop so they can go ahead and get everything planned. And if the funding comes through, they will only require $10,000-ish from us rather than the 27, but it will be difficult for them to go ahead with some of the planning if they don't know they have the funding in place.
It's reasonable.
Yeah.
And I think just to add to that, I don't consider this a one-off in the sense it's one-off funding, but the plans associated with this are quite large in the sense of it's going to be travel around Alberta, and that they're actually looking, I don't think it's going to happen, but they're looking to actually have a WAP May Day become official in Alberta. So this is definitely beyond a one-day celebration. I was shocked at all that's happening. This is definitely a celebration that will highlight Edson in a lot of places. So I do think when we're talking celebrations, it's with our tourism, a huge thing that we're trying to do.
Councillor Barr.
Through the chair to administration. So if they do get all the grants that they're hoping for and anticipating, and it only costs us 10,000 or costs cost us 10,000, then the remaining 17,300 would just not come out of reserve.
That's
and
correct.
would that
It
be
would-
then included in like a potential surplus if there was one, or
No, because
just-
if it comes out of a reserve, we just wouldn't remove it from the reserve,
Okay.
and so it would just remain
it
there.
would just stay there? Okay.
All right. That wraps up our operations. Are we clear as
Well,
mud?
no, we've still got lots of work to do. So now we have to go back and say, hey, based on what you've told us, the tax increase would be approximately, Sarah?
20%.
Yeah.
This one actually have
Yeah, no, that's fine, just what you've got. Oh, do you want to just get, I just,
and then we can actually.
Do we
come
want
back
to
with
break
like a-
for
Yeah.
15
Yeah,
minutes?
even just 5 minutes is fine.
Yeah, let's have a
Okay.
quick
Or Kathy.
15
Yeah.
break. 10
basically what we've done here is we've just kind of gone through the list and kind of brought together the feedback that we feel like we received. And so we can now kind of talk about that. So I think the first thing Sarah's going to do, she's going to go through the list of what we considered optional items but that were funded from the reserve. This means they don't have any direct taxation impact. And then we'll, or perhaps we start the other way. That one's really the more meaningful one. The list that is going to impact taxation and what that looks like now, and then council can make some additional deliberation. So maybe we'll start with that one
You
because
want to
I
start with
think,
the tax one first?
yeah.
Okay. The other one's gentler.
Rubber hits the road. Here we
This
go.
is what matters.
All right, so just going through some of the adjustments we made with recycling and removing some of the things we're going to readdress, like the Boys and Girls Club grant at a later date. That's brought that taxation down to 4.23, including all the things that we had on there. So that included the 5,000 for the IT, for the enhancement of the security, 15,000 for the medical response through fire, the adjustment for recycling down to 50, so that's one of the drops there. We still have the 15,000 for the elder abuse in there. $6,000 for the youth council bursary reserve we'll be setting up. 20,000 for Vision Park and 20,000 for the FRMA.
So how much for Vision Park?
20.
Pardon?
20,000
Okay,
for
just
Vision
trying to
Park.
write these.
And 20 for FRMA. So with those included, we're now to 4.23. However, there was some talk of moving 50,000 from the medical centre maybe to a reserve this year to try and address that 200,000 that's offsetting operations, as well as the rec complex money of around 120. If we moved that to a reserve instead of having that as revenue neutral as far as taxation goes, you're looking at around a 6% increase.
How much?
6.
Say it with conviction.
Yeah.
6%. All right,
So
so
that's where we
so
stand
this
now.
is
So
where the rubber hits,
4.23
yeah.
with what was presented and adjusted, and 6 with the recommendations for reserve transfers that have come from council.
okay. So maybe we'll just work our way around the table on our thoughts on that. I'll start and then I'll go around the table and see what people
Perhaps
think.
we can just start with the big picture of, hey, what kind of tax increase are you going to be able to support, rather than the specific items?
Okay. What kind of tax increase would you like to support? I'll let you guys start on that. Councillor Chouinard.
First, I want to work towards 3%. 3%.
Okay, as I should have actually said this at the beginning. With the up to that required budget, that is a 3.24 as it stands now. So that would then mean being revisiting some of the current levels of service we have now and deciding what you would like to cut from those,
Without adding anything else.
without adding anything of those, of
Okay,
any,
that's fine.
Which
any
means
of those
you're
ones I just
funding
mentioned,
for
right?
That's
your
fine. That's,
FRMA
if
is
that's your
gone.
perspective,
Yeah.
that's totally fine. That's what
Hey,
we're looking for.
3.2.
Excuse
Sorry,
me, can I
Councillor
just
Wilson.
ask, and then this isn't Evergreen's Foundation on top of this, and this isn't GYPSD?
They have no effect on taxation.
Okay,
Just your tax bill.
your tax bill.
Yeah,
They-
those
But
those
that's
are
not
those are
I don't
completely
know, I was just
irrelevant
gonna
to the
ask
conversation we're
that.
having right now.
Yeah.
Completely irrelevant.
It's not for a resident, it's not, but for our purposes, it kind of is because
Yeah.
we need to fund our own.
We can't make
operations.
we cannot make our funding decisions based on what Alberta education is going to do.
No, I know, I
Yeah.
know.
We
Yeah.
cannot.
I get what
But
you're.
we can make our funding on what our citizens can afford to pay. We
I-
can make our decision based on
Certainly,
that,
but
which encompasses those.
and I'm fine with that.
things.
But I think you just have to have the context then of what municipal percentage do you
Yeah.
think it's appropriate to ask your citizens to pay, not what overall percentage, and then we let the province take as much as they want, and we're left with a tiny little sliver of that.
Okay, I just-
But I understand your question, Councillor Wilkins.
Councillor Byer.
Through the chair to administration, can we get that on the screen at all? Like all that stuff you just listed? Like it.
Huge.
Just take it out.
Yeah, I'm sorry. It just like I started writing it down and then it just
Yeah, we
like, got
can-
lost in it.
hang
so.
on,
We'll just type it in a Word
It's not
document.
showing
Or
us a
is-
phone. Okay,
Yeah,
I can see what I
don't
can
have
do
to be
here.
fancy, but
Yeah,
just
just type it into
yeah,
a Word
I
document
can't
real
remember
quick.
the second thing you said. So.
Sarah, that was the round
Oh,
one.
hang
I know,
on,
I
hang
was
on,
like,
hang
oh,
on. With
there's
way
finance
too many
writing,
conversations
no?
going on here. Councillor
Just did
Sorensen.
it come through.
I will go on
The
the
result.
record
Oh,
saying
Yeah.
Sorry.
Sorry?
that I would be in support of a 5% tax increase. And I know it sounds like a lot, but we are in an infrastructure deficit, and we've put off tax increases for the last 2 or 3 years. So I think we do need to catch up. So I would be in support of 5%. I know it sounds like a lot.
Okay, so we have Councillor Chenard, Councillor Sorensen. I'll ask Councillor Curry.
Okay. I'm just looking back at previous years and I'm looking at our MPI and our own tax increases and that, and I would agree with Councillor Sorensen that we do have an obligation to make up for past lack of increases or high enough increases. And I would go anywhere between 4.5 and 5. I would also be comfortable with.
Okay, Councillor Byer.
Through the chair, my response are the same as Councillor Curry and Councillor Sorensen. I'm not a firm believer in 0% tax, no tax increases, because it only puts us further behind. And I think I would be comfortable with that 4%, 4.5% to 5%. In the event that we won't be having that the following year as well, that we can try our best to commit to sticking to something else, and then whether we add that 1% on or something, so the residents are prepared for what the following year might look like, but that it wouldn't be the same as the 2019 year.
Okay, Councillor Wilkinson and Councillor Bevan.
Sorry, I just have to ask,
Sure.
when you're talking
How
about
much your tax
the comparison here with Edson tax increase, like in 2016, we had a 3%, which when you average with the others was much higher. So you're saying the catch up for the year that we had 0%, is that what you're saying?
If you look at the
Well,
bottom,
even
if you look at the
1.9.
bottom
I'm looking
number,
there.
yeah, we're 1%
We're
behind
1%?
municipal price index,
Exactly.
but this doesn't account for infrastructure deficit. It doesn't account for any service changes
No,
that
but
are
based
asked
on this
for.
chart, if we're basing it on this chart, it's
Yeah.
1%.
But no, it would be 1% plus that 3.24% this year, so that would be a minimum of 4.24% this year, just to catch up. Just to catch up would be 4.24%, because we're at 8.1.
To catch up with the municipal price index.
That's
Yeah,
correct.
One.
with-
So
That's
then
correct.
they also would have to.
But that, don't forget, this has our 219, so that has 3.24. So
Yeah.
we would need 4.24 this year, just to be in line.
That's right,
Yeah.
1%.
Yeah, on top of 3.24,
Yes.
so not
So
1%.
4.24.
Yeah.
4.24,
exactly.
not 1%.
Okay, I would go for 4.
Okay, so Councillor Wilkinson said 4. Councillor Bevan.
Second page. Oh.
Thank you, Commissioner. Well, you know, in the past there, we knew that we was no tax increase, we were gonna have to, you know, make up for it, and that, I knew that coming into here. And I also agree, no, we gotta get back here. I would be comfortable with the, you know, not comfortable, but I mean, we've got to make a 4.5 to 5% increase on it. If we don't, we're going to be playing more catch-up on other years to come, and it's going to, grow.
Yeah. All right, and for me, I think 4.5 is about as far as I will be willing to go. 5 is a little high. It might get me up to 4.9. Just sounds better, makes me feel a little bit more comfortable. I know we've done a lot of fee increases as well. We have a lot of pressures, but if we are going to make a tough choice this year, and this is a tough choice, and we all around this table pay taxes just like everybody else, and I know the public sometimes forgets that, so it impacts us personally as well, but we have real costs. So if the public wants good snow removal, if the public wants access to facilities, if the public wants trails and parks and these sorts of things, and police responding when they call, guess what, there's costs associated with that. So anywhere from 4.5 to 5, I think I'd be okay with some reservation, and hopefully that by the time we finalize this in the spring, maybe we will see some reductions in some areas. But that's going to take a lot of work, and I know that administration has been working hard over the years to try to contain costs. So having said that, I think most people are comfortable around 4.5 to 5, except Councillor Chenard. And Councillor Wilkinson, maybe a little bit lower, 4%.
I said 4, but I mean, we will have to go with what's reasonable, and we really don't know what spring will bring.
Yeah.
We could have just a big boom and sell all the spots.
Well, and
Sell lots of spots.
and this is the context missing from the conversation is if we actually had assessment growth, this wouldn't be as would be a lot easier. But because we've been kind of hand tied because of economics, it's really become a bigger burden on existing ratepayers. So
And that could change.
yeah. Councillor Chenard.
I still believe we gotta struggle hard at it, because in the last year, our increases, like the 1475, all these little increases that we put on the burden, somewhere along the line, I agree, we have to play catch up. And we can't blame it on what we could have, should have done before.
No,
This is
'cause we
moving
didn't.
forward. And that's my reason why we gotta get it to 3, because we've already put a lot of extra cost on the taxpayers, on the extra user fees and et cetera. If we did none of that, I'd be more like to go 4
So
or 5.
what would you give up?
I don't know, we gotta go.
This is the problem,
There's
right?
things that
That's
gets
the
Okay,
pushed.
but with that said, 1% is 100,000, so I guess it's our task, we gotta go back and where can we trim? You know, in some of the cases, we might have to trim something, try to keep the core service and.
So perhaps now is a good time to go back and review the optional
Yes.
list that
Yes.
we.
Could take
Just
That-
trying to get that up on the screen.
Yeah, so if we do that, I was just discussing this with Sarah, so hopefully she doesn't kick me under the table if I say this here. That's why I got this nice little divider here to keep my shins safe. We've felt for the last couple of years that there is some room inside the Repsol Place budget. The way we budgeted for maintenance, in particular major maintenance in the past, we basically have budgeted for catastrophe to happen every year, and it just doesn't. And so some of that future operational reserve for a multiplex could probably be absorbed within the existing Repsol Place budget. It's kind of a half measure from replacing the operational budget from the rec complex, but I think it would demonstrate that we were making provisions for the future operation of the multiplex. It's one of the reasons we haven't really kind of cut it back in the past, knowing that operational burden is coming. But we can certainly be more direct in saying 100,000 or 50,000 or whatever we feel is appropriate in terms of room. Could be specifically identified as going into a multiplex operational reserve to prepare for the new multiplex. So that may address it. I don't know if that assists council with that concept or not, but that is something that is, I think, possible.
So that'd be reserve to reserve, right?
No, it'd be operations to reserve. Yep.
It's 1.75%.
But that brings you back to my.
It would be operations to reserve, but it wouldn't be what was it wouldn't be what was happening at the rec complex before. It would just be coming out of that facility, still in the facilities world, but.
No, Chad would be up there too.
But I do think as well that it's we've done really, really well in a couple of areas in terms of keeping certain costs out of the operational budget. For example, look at our 2 major franchise fees. ATCO goes completely into the operational budget and Fortis doesn't. Look at water and sewer. One of our budgets, we've done a pretty good job of building some capital reserves, and the other we haven't. The medical center, when we paid off that debenture, the right thing to do would have been to immediately transfer that to a reserve. It didn't happen at that time. Now we're stuck in that situation. So we've done really well in a few areas, and we've missed a few. And so we just have to, I think, slowly, I just think directly and methodically look at these situations and deal with them over time as well. So,
And I would have to agree with what Councillor Chenard said, because I've been on council before. Coulda, woulda, shoulda. There's lots of things that when I was on council that if I look back now, I probably would make different choices.
yeah, no, absolutely.
I guess, okay, do we have that?
It's
discussed?
just, he's just
Keep talking
finishing.
for-
He's just
Oh,
finishing.
Oh,
up.
sorry, no pressure.
But yeah, so
Thank you.
Councillor Byer?
Through the chair to Mr. Jericott. When so you said you budgeted for Repsol and then for catastrophic failures and they haven't happened, then was that just absorbed into a surplus?
that's
or
correct.
deficit?
Yeah, so that would have ended up in the surplus.
Okay.
And we also do have an additional administration or major building maintenance reserve of 300,000 set aside. So even if we were to take away from some of that funding, we do have a $300,000 reserve where if something catastrophic did happen, we do have some ability to address that without, going to taxation.
Okay,
Through the
Councillor
chair, we
Woodson.
must have saved some money on labor costs and stuff when we haven't been operating the rec center out there.
Well, this is what Sarah was mentioning before, that we had already started pushing those costs down from what they were before. And so that is part of what had helped us reduce some of the operating expenses in years past. But
And do we get any percentage on things sold in the arena? I'm just talking future hockey games, we don't get a percentage.
for like
Sales,
merchandise and stuff like that?
No, just.
alcohol sales.
No, we don't currently, but we do get almost $30,000 additional revenue from the rental of
Yes,
the ice
that's
that we
right.
don't get
That's
before.
right.
So I think
Yeah.
that's generally
Okay.
what
I
we
just thought
see.
maybe
But
we're
but I
just-
also think this is just as you brought that up, this is really why administration, certainly myself, push back and say, look, we can't afford to be subsidizing any business-related organization, and I think council did a nice job there. But these are the types of reasons why we just can't give them special rates on ice or anything like that, because of back up and look at the big picture, and there's just a lot of pressure that we're feeling there.
I just thought we were gonna roll in the money.
It's certainly better to have the 30,000 than to not. So
It is.
yeah.
And to have that in town. Yes.
Oh, here we go.
Just a quick little list we made here.
Can you
So the
enlarge
top-
that at all?
Uh-huh.
Or-
And big in it, please.
And big in it.
Thank you, by the way.
Holy Jesus.
A little bigger. That's
There we
pretty
go.
That's pretty good.
I can see
Good,
now.
make it. Okay, that's the total at the bottom. I should have had a line around that.
Okay, so this is the items that were in that optional category that would directly impact taxation.
Plus the 2 bottom ones for reserve transfers that were mentioned.
Oh.
So if there's any on there that you want to readdress and remove, we can. talk about
Councillor
it now.
Chenard.
The last two is 120, so I haven't heard anything, there's 1.7 right there. And I mean, yes, we have to save for the future, but if we can take that out, then we don't have to charge as much
That's
tax.
6% with that in.
So
No.
without those 2, if we have all of these in,
Uh-huh.
you're at that about 4.2-ish
Okay, so I gotta
range.
knock another $100,000.
You add those in, we go up to your 5.9 to 6.
Oh, that.
I also think if we're talking about making the tough financial decision, it doesn't help us to take off those reserve transfers and then fund future operational pressures that next year we're funding those and still
Okay,
trying to
with
find
that
that.
question, what we see up here, how much is our predicted tax rate?
With that, 6.
With the 301?
So above the space, 4.2, below, if you include the 170 below it, 6.
6.
So we're at 4.2 above.
Yes.
I'm gonna get rid of that.
Councillor Sorensen.
Correct me if I'm wrong, I thought when we ran around the table, I thought the majority of us were head nodding that our elder abuse funding was not.
Okay, yeah, so this is what we want to do and
Yeah.
do that. So I certainly, my feel was that there was not the majority support at the table for that item.
I would remove, okay, let's go around the table on that, let's go from the top. So IT security enhancement, who's yes?
Just place your, yeah.
Put your hands up.
Yeah.
Yes, everybody is in favor, so that stays. Medical first responders at 15,000, who is yes?
Can I ask
Hey, I hope the
Sure.
fire department sees this. 'cause
Okay,
I need to-
no. Councillor Byer.
through the chair to administration, is there any way that we could get those, the stats that the, prior to engaging this in July of 2018, the medical first responders, what the ambulance was asking the fire department, how often and what kind of calls they were asking them to come out?
Yeah, we'll definitely
when
bring
that
back a
was necessary, before we
report.
have to.
We can get that to you before you finalize the
Okay.
budget in December.
That would be good.
Okay,
But, yeah.
thank you.
So my question on that with the medical first responders, if we lowered that to say 10, is that something that the fire department would be able to manage within their existing budget to provide that service?
We would definitely have to, yeah.
Okay.
But
It doesn't seem like a lot, but I see the benefit, but we have to do some trimming here. That would be my recommendation if we could see if we could do that somehow.
She's got the big calculator in.
Thoughts?
reducing that to 10?
Yeah.
Reducing
I'm
that? It's
consensus.
very small, but it's something.
It's something to start.
Yeah, so, is that a
Yep.
majority of 10?
Yes.
10, and then when we take this.
No,
And
hey,
then, once we get
this
stats,
is-
I might-
Believe it or not, this is the way this process works. So
Yeah.
this is a $20+ million budget.
Mhm.
And when Sarah and I go through this, we're talking sometimes about amounts of $500. Like,
Yeah,
so it's,
exactly.
you've got to go through that process. So if we change that to 10, then we go on to recycling. So I maintain my recommendation that there's no point in us budgeting for additional monies when we have no idea what the future for this holds. This is only a very temporary answer to this question, obviously, but we can easily remove that $50,000 is my position.
I think we need to meet with the recycling society before we make a decision.
But that's what I'm saying is maintain it as what it is, and then go meet with them and figure out what's
We
coming.
have to
Yeah.
meet with them.
But that's just that's my take on it.
my
I'm also anticipating some significant adjustment in that dynamic. I don't know exactly what that means, but
Yeah. So, on the recycling portion, my concern with removing that 50,000 is as soon as we finalize this today, that's gonna be the number that we're gonna be basing our decisions off of. And then if we have to add $50,000, all of a sudden, we've kind of put ourselves in a bind. I'd rather work high and make ourselves go lower than underestimate and then all of a sudden have to try to find 50,000. I certainly understand what administration is saying there. We don't know what those numbers are going to look like, but that's kind of the way I look at it,
Well,
Councillor Chenard.
my only thing looking at it, if we take out, hypothetically, we take out the 50 grand, if the recycling, let's say we scale them back, there's still a cost. Because if hypothetically they say, you know what, we're walking away, we still gotta run it, other with
A
town
lot more
staff.
money.
So, putting the 50,000, have to agree with your comment, we're better off to be a little higher in, and then we can trim it. Because if something doesn't go right, I should use the word, if there's a drastic change instead of right, there's still a cost. We're not all of a sudden drastically changing it, town takes over from the board, it's not free. So there is a number, recycling is gonna cost the town of Edson no matter how we do it. So I would
yeah,
leave
any-
that number in.
Everybody want to leave that number in, or do we want to see an adjustment there?
I would be happy with that number coming out. Only because I don't think we should be paying more. When I look at waste management, the costs and expenses of waste management, and I look at the cost of recycling, the expenses are more for recycling than waste management. And waste management is a core service. that everyone uses, and recycling is not. And so I don't think that budget should be higher. I have
Okay.
concerns with the difference in expenses of those. When I look at them and I look at the expenses, granted, I don't know, all the dynamics of this, but to me, those are substantial different. Those two should have similar expenses, and you're talking almost $100,000 more.
Okay.
for that.
Oh, good point. Councillor Sherrard?
Just to respond back, that I would have to argue the point, yes, we all use recycling, because the reason waste management is down is because in '98, we imposed recycling. Because I can tell you from experience, when there was no recycling, the volume of garbage was double. So recycling, we all use because people recycle and the garbage volume's down. That's why, because if you were hauling twice as much garbage, yes, recycling's down, but garbage is up, because either way, the consumer brings home so much wrapping, I'm gonna call it, and you other recycler, you trash it, so, everybody uses recycling.
I just mean in the sense of it's not an actual service that we are providing to every residence, is what I mean by everyone's not using it. The garbage is a
We're
provided
providing
service.
it, they're not choosing to use it.
Yeah, they're not choosing to
Well,
use it, that's what I mean.
the other have to choose to use it, or they're restricted to the amount of waste they put out.
And lots of people are doing that. Lots of people are taking their.
So far, I've heard more support for keeping the $50,000 in.
Yeah.
Okay.
$15,000 for part-time regional elder abuse coordinator
I'm a no.
or effort.
I would have to say no now that I learned that we have someone in FCS that could handle it. If it needs to be, there is someone there. And then plus, we don't have the answer from our other two partners.
I hate to say it, and I shouldn't say it, but I'll have to say no.
Yeah.
No one said this
Jim, I
was.
agree with you.
I'll buy you a glass of wine later.
No one said this was
I-
going to be easy.
No, what we can afford and what we can't afford.
I honestly, I really believe in the work that
I do too.
that has been occurring there. But at the end of the day, I think this is a cost being downloaded to us. And I think we have existing systems in place with our
This
municipalities.
happens regularly where the province starts out by funding
Yeah.
a program,
And then.
then we
dumps it
come to
on us.
believe in it, then they take
Yeah.
away the funding, and we're caught in that
I
trap
much,
of funding
from
it.
my perspective, like I said before, I'd much rather fund 211. I think it has way more benefit, even though I believe that's also a provincial
Yeah, don't.
responsibility. Having said that, if the other regional partners decide to move forward, then I'm willing to have that discussion again at a future date. But for the time being, I'm a no.
It's certainly an amount we can manage at a future date in another manner.
Yeah.
I think youth council is a yes from
Youth
everyone.
council is a
I think
yes.
that's-
Okay, Vision Park, $20,000 for.
Here's one administration will offer to remove.
Seriously?
Seriously.
I'm for good removing.
Okay, good.
I think it may require some adjustments in services. It's going to require some difficult conversations with the users out there, but I think
And you actually play ball, so
I do.
if you're
Yeah.
saying no.
Love the facility.
okay,
Love the
yeah.
facility.
My only
Okay.
concern is, are we gonna still be able to accomplish what was proposed here today? Because I think that what we need to do out there is work that needs to be done. And I would, for $20,000, I would rather keep it there to make sure that work gets done. But if you can do it within your existing budgets, then
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think our objective will not change in terms of providing those levels of service. It's always nice to have additional resources, but Jim and his group are going to just have to reevaluate and
okay.
and sharpen it a little bit there. I think, as I spoke with Jim, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, it cost them more than what they had anticipated to provide the level of service they provided last year, but there's room for that to come down as well. And we need to get better buy-in from the users out there, in particular the adult softball league are not very respectful of those diamonds. They play on them in all kinds of weather.
Really?
When they play on them in bad weather, it requires additional maintenance, and we really just need to firm up and say, you either have to pay way more money, and even if you do, you still can't play on them. I'm just using that as an example, but we're just never going to get where we want to be or where council wants us to be without making some difficult adjustments there. But.
So a question around that is, we had in the spring of last year asking people to stay off of the Griffiths Park diamonds, and there was advertising everywhere. Lo and behold, driving home from work, and there's people playing on the diamonds. At Vision Park, is there a signage opportunity? Is there an opportunity to have a fine structure that if you're caught playing out there?
That's our approach this year. We'll be dealing with the leagues. so minor ball directly and the adult league, is that there will just be costs associated with playing on diamonds. Once the town has determined, and the town will determine whether or not they can play, if they play after we say no, then there would be some costs associated
Yeah.
with that. Yeah.
Good, and our bylaw officers would be able to enforce that.
Yeah, or we just don't let them go out on the, I think
Okay.
the cost will be you just can't play on the diamonds anymore if you don't
Okay. Oh,
respect
okay.
that. Yeah.
Maybe banned
That's right.
essentially.
Yeah.
That's
Just
right.
like, okay.
Just like if we had ice users that were disrespecting the
Mhm.
ice facility, we would
Okay.
toss them, so.
Yeah, there's big costs associated there. Councillor Bevan?
You know, and I agree with that, removing that, because I think we get, like, CEO said, we get better buy-in from our user groups, and if we get everybody out there, we make full use of the potential out there with everybody, and our tournaments coming out there, we can make a revenue off it, and be able to bring it back up and go to that, part of the budget for them, that, so I think, you know, you may have to tighten your belt a little bit, but I think in the long run, if we get everything out there, all tournaments come back for everybody, I think we'll, you know.
Yeah, if I may also add to that, Vision Park is, we've only recently taken this over. We've had some cursory preliminary discussions. We really believe that this should be a cost shared facility as well. It is, the adult ball league is half
Lots of
county, half
county,
town.
Oh, sure, it should.
So we're definitely gonna pursue that as well, and that's where I think we'll find the ability to reduce the direct burden on the town, but also accomplish some of the objectives that were described today. And so maybe this will just strengthen
Yeah.
Jim's interest in chasing down the county and seeing if they will consider support for Vision Park there, so.
Okay. FRMA.
Full support.
Full support there, full support, full support, full support, full support.
All right, so with those changes, that takes the ones above where we are, and including the one we're on, okay, like that. The ones above where the cursor is, to 3.86, and then the total including underneath to 5.4.
So what would, sorry. Mike, when you're talking about the contingency plan that's in place for a major disaster at Repso Place?
Yes.
What would you say comfortably, looking at that rec complex operational reserves, would be able to go from that budget into that reserve?
Lots.
Like
All of
more
it?
than 120?
Yeah. Lots of it. Yeah, I honestly, I'd have to go back and look at what we spent the last couple of years to see that, but the fact that we, like I said, have that reserve in place for if something major happens. I'm a little bit hesitant here only because this is kind of a half measure. That's money that's already kind of in the operational budget, and so it's not actually producing an additional operating capacity. I think it is creating a better dynamic in terms of the future funding of the multiplex, but that doesn't change the reality of the money that was operating the rec complex still being basically absorbed into the general budget.
Councillor Byron.
Through the chair to administration. So further to Councillor Curry's comment, if that the wiggle room that you've created in Repsol Place for a catastrophe, if we put that into a reserve this year, and then and there was a catastrophe, then we could still take it out of that reserve. Is that not something that
We certainly
do?
could, but we have even an additional reserve beyond that that is set up specifically to deal with those types of issues. So
Okay, but if we had to, there's a
Yeah.
possibility there, and then next year or for 2020, then
it would absolutely be there for an operational consideration going forward. Yeah.
Okay.
I'll
Councillor
suggest,
Johnson.
I'll suggest we take $100,000 from that Repsol disaster expense and put it into an operational reserve.
And then eliminate the 120 here.
To make that 100. Oh, no,
No, we would
take
we would
down.
eliminate it.
Okay.
So, so what's being suggested, $100,000?
From the Repsol expense.
From the
It's already
existing
being
Repsol
expensed.
budget, yeah.
Okay.
Go
So
straight
this
to
would
reserve.
disappear
So
entirely.
And then this would disappear.
And what would that impact be for taxation
We
then?
will tell you in just be 15, just be the 15. 4.32.
Getting there.
Go ahead, Councillor Chenard.
Okay, if all the ones that are on the top line, there are only expenses this year, correct? So
No.
not gonna be-
No.
These are ongoing expenses.
Well, 5,000 isn't.
No, but if you go up, because.
No, it
No, it
is.
is,
Yeah,
it
it
is.
It's purchases for programs, and you
Okay.
have to buy
Right.
the
So these are
annual
ongoing, so I
subscription.
mean, like what I'm thinking, if we took those two bottom lines out, we have the 300,000, you know, in there, and then, okay, so every one of them is ongoing?
I'm an absolutely huge supporter of the $50,000 from the medical center. That to me is the most, if you're asking me, that's the
very
most important thing on that list.
Okay,
And that will be
because that one-
ongoing until we
Till, yeah.
clear
Right,
that money
because
that
the
we're using.
200,000 was actually going into our operational finance.
So
So
we're
this
kind
will
of
definitely
backing
be in
off.
for 4 years
Yeah.
to continue.
So by taking it out, we're not doing ourselves any favors.
So everything that's on that list, funded from taxes, down to the 50,000, how much is that? Tax,
Including or ahead?
Including the 50?
including the
Including
50?
4.3.
So we're there.
4.3.
Yes.
Yeah.
We're getting closer to minority.
No, I think we're good.
Yeah.
We might be there if we don't have an increase in recycling. Well, what would be without the 50,000 for recycling?
Without the 50?
3.8.
3.8,
Yeah.
3.9,
But-
or,
Yeah, because that one, like, we have to leave in, but with the conversation.
We don't.
We don't have to leave it in.
No, but if we leave it in, what I'm saying, then when we have our conversation
Can make a
at
decision.
that time, so prior to passing the budget, maybe the number can come out. So we're better off to be high, we're at what, 4.3 now? So we're better off to go into this at 4.3.
And then be able to back off
And
of it
then
later.
if possibly, then we can lower it. So what, you know, there's no harm in coming in high. And
I
then
don't think there's any harm in staying high.
No.
I
No, but I
don't think
mean,
this is high. I think that's-
4.3 isn't horrible.
No,
Well,
it's not.
if
I'm
you-
saying 3 and like that, but I mean,
Mhm.
4.3 isn't horrible.
Well, just to be clear, even with that 50,000 in,
Yeah.
the recycling society as is gonna have to reduce services. Or
Yeah,
get
because
more-
they
or
asked
get
for
more-
100 some,
Yeah,
right?
they asked for 180.
Yeah.
So they're gonna be short, they're gonna have to reduce services or find more grants.
Yeah.
No, I thought we were at 5, at the 525 mark. Well, that, how much was the increase? So it went from
We were at
4
480
Yes.
or 460.
460.
Oh,
They
okay.
asked for 180 more and we're saying, well, we'll give you, well, for this budget, we'll do
Okay,
50
that's,
more.
okay.
So there's gonna be some impacts there.
Yeah,
So, but I think we're being reasonable.
yeah.
And that number might change drastically based on conversations and what
Mhm.
up or
And
down.
markets,
Yeah,
markets.
markets too, so,
Yeah.
wow, okay.
That is
Are
a
we
lot.
good on operational now?
Yeah, I think we'll just quickly buzz through the operational projects that are more of the one-offs that would come from reserves and just ensure council is generally supportive of those. So these are the ones that are just a one-time cost and would come from revenue sharing.
So
The
these are coming
GIS
from-
is the asset management module to support the mapping for the assets. 1,500 is for the refurbishing out here. $60,000 for the, I think, more than a human resource management module. It's more than just payroll, but certainly payroll is the biggest driver there. The promotional videos, the feedback we got was redo them all, but then in the future budget to keep them current over time rather than doing it every 3 or 4 years. $75,000 is equipment lease.
But isn't that, 75,000, isn't that every year, or what, or why are we leasing?
It is, but that was coming from what was
Yeah.
previously reserve transfer.
that one's not from
Yeah,
revenue
so it doesn't
sharing.
affect taxation, but $35,000 just to support the creation of the design standards. $35,000, this is the offsite levy module in our financial software to better track that. $16,000 for the Scout Shack Youth Center refurbishing, and then the $27,000 for the May festivities.
Okay, any comments, concerns, Councilor
Well, I
Edson?
just look here, coming up on our next budget that we're looking at, a capital budget, and server replacement. Can you just explain that to me, and is it going to affect any of this GIS, the HR payroll module, or that link in the software?
but Sarah will definitely explain.
Okay, but
The
none of
purpose
those
of that.
things will be affected.
No, because that would be a hardware, this is more of a software
Okay.
type.
All right, thank you.
I think we're all okay on the
We're
reserves.
fine with that.
Councillor Curry.
I thought the scout shack was 25.
It is, but it's cost shared
It's
with
cost
the
shared.
cost shared
Oh,
with the
okay,
county.
that's
So
our share.
our
Okay,
portion is
this what we pay
16,000.
for these
Yeah.
things. We can't cost share any of these other ones?
I'm sure they would be happy to cost share our human
Just
resources.
kidding, just
payroll
kidding. They're
and
getting
all
cost share 27.3 for
Quite frankly, Yellow County is very
that.
awesome.
If you'll
to us.
remember where we said we were paying for all of this from the revenue sharing, so the county's already paying for the majority of this.
And I, we kind of joke about that, but think about if Yellowhead County was not good regional partners to us,
Absolutely.
what kind of impact that would be having on us today. So something to keep in mind on ongoing conversations, right?
Thank your
So-
local county councillor.
Yes,
Well, even
thank you.
Evergreens Foundation, they pay 50% of it, Yellowhead County.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
really, yes, we need to
Yeah,
be
no,
thankful.
it's okay. So administration will take this and we'll work from this approximately a 4.3. We're obviously going to go through and double check that we've caught everything and captured that. And we'll make sure if there's other things that we feel are appropriate, but we'll work based on this information to bring this back to council.
Just a brief point too, we will be launching the budget tool, online budget tool, and I'm sure we'll get some feedback from the public on that, so
Yeah.
we'll see what their priorities are. And
Yep, we are a very tight timeline for that.
yeah,
Have to get them the information very early in the week, so we'll be working very hard to make sure we have the right figures being sent to them. When you see this back, it will be at the committee meeting on the 13th, and it will be in the presentation style, so we won't be going through all of this.
Oh, come on, Sarah.
If you want me to, I don't mind.
thank you, Sarah and administration and everybody here for your tremendous hard work today and all of council. But we're not done yet. We got more to do.
Right.
We go into capital.
Now that we got your warrant out, let's move on to the capital here. So in a capital sense, just how you look at this is the left column is the cost of the projects proposed, and the right is where the funding will come from. So either reserves from county agreements or support grants or through debenture. So perhaps we'll just briefly run through these, and unless council has any very specific questions or concerns, then we'll move from there. But so the first one is a server replacement. I believe also this is a twinning of the servers. Is that
Yeah, I have
correct?
some notes from
if you
the
wanna-
IT guy, because he understands it, and I don't, so we'll run through. Obviously, it has reached its end of life, so it needs to be replaced. And it is the backbone of all our operations, so we think everything links through this. We're trying to actually do what they call dual service or node computing. So
I think you just made that up.
He could be the home just laughing at me talking about stuff that makes no sense. I don't know. So instead of just having the one server, there's actually two servers. So it protects against hardware failure. And in the event of a failure, it would continue uninterrupted because you can just switch to the other server. So they work side by side. And it actually will pull everything together into one area, and that helps with efficiency as well. Also for a sandbox environment where
I can see you're really confident. in
Go for it.
discussing this.
Okay. So it allows for a parallel server environment where you can test all your testing of your updates on one server while the other one's still running everything. And if you find something doesn't work, or you can back that out straight without any interruption to day-to-day operations with everybody. Having the two servers helps with data consolidation. It eliminates the current data fragmentation we have. We have them stored across various different areas. It will all just consolidate it into one place. And it better accommodates our growing storage challenges as well. Our servers actually getting quite full, so having those dual servers and better servers will help with our storage as well.
It's like if you've lived in a house for 20 years and every closet is just jammed right full of stuff. That's what our servers are like. That's what our servers like right now.
That wasn't corrected at
I'm glad it's not just me. But, so.
And we have a lot of places where they actually store or save a lot of their files on their own hard drives on their computer or their desktops, because that's not being backed up. So we're having everything come into the one place, so we need that extra storage for that, so that everything will be backed up across the whole organisation.
I think
And
that's,
just mentioning that we have moved forward with our technology by doing our email up to the cloud. These new servers that he's looking at is actually, again, bringing our technology forward.
so we might be up to like 2008 levels.
Yeah,
if
something
we,
like that.
Councillor Byerly and Councillor Curry.
Through the chair to administration, I'm in support of a server replacement. I think if we don't do something like this, we end up getting leapfrogged by other technologies. And a question though, if there was some type of an emergency or something was down, say no electricity or something, are we backed up any way that we can still function in an emergency?
I believe there are battery backups within the server room that will keep us going for a certain amount of time.
Okay.
I'm not sure what that time frame is though.
yeah, I also believe Giles does regular data backups, so
Okay.
that within a few days we would only have to go back
Right.
to then to. So we may lose a few days of data or work, but we're generally doing regular backups where we can continue to function without only a few days of lost work.
Right.
But
Okay.
Are those backups on site, or are they on the cloud, or?
I think he does a hard backup.
We do hard backup once a week, but I think there is some that's actually, we're looking at definitely doing it up into the cloud.
Yeah, because I know with
Instead of having
Slave
a-
Lake, when their office burnt, they lost everything because they didn't have it backed
Yeah.
up. So,
Yeah.
go ahead, Councillor Curry.
I'm sure you can answer this question for me. Miss
I'll
Daly.
try.
What's the average lifespan of a server?
Like
Right.
10,
I
15
think about
minutes.
10, 15 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've had this one, I think, around the 10, 11 year.
I would not expect to have these servers in 10 years from now.
No.
You got to be doing them every 5 to
Yeah,
10 for sure.
quicker and quicker and quicker. The nice thing is they're also becoming, relatively speaking, the computing power we're buying per dollar is exceptional compared to the computing power per dollar you paid for 5 or 10 years ago. So you're getting more, but the technology is just changing so quickly.
Councillor Swenson.
I really want to know the answer to this question, but I don't think anybody can answer it.
Probably not.
I know there's online server capabilities.
Yep.
And so having 2 physical servers in the same building doesn't make much sense to me. Having one off-site would make a lot more sense to me. So
I think that's more to do with internet and the bandwidth that we would need. If we have an off-site server, we need that bandwidth for all of us to do all our work, all trying to connect to that server off-site. And I just don't think that Edson has that bandwidth that we would need for all of us to be able to access that server.
Isn't this building tied in SuperNet? Should have plenty.
Yeah, so I would. I
I
definitely appreciate and understand the question, Councillor Sorensen, and I'm sure Giles has been thoughtful about that, and I'd be happy to follow up on that question for you. Yeah. But I think I think I asked him the exact same question. I just don't remember the answer because I'm just like, get it into the cloud, get it into the cloud. But so I think that's a good question that we can follow up on.
Any other questions about that? Moving on to protective services.
So a few of these I think are pretty, items that have been there for a while. The fire training structure, this has been in the budget now for a couple of years. As we work with Yellowhead County, we're just recommending that we keep this funding in place so as that projects move forward, we can participate in it. The self-contained breathing apparatus. Yeah, it's
I
like
know. I just typed
self-breathing. What the?
Sorry.
This is just an ongoing process where we've been replacing the breathing apparatus for the fire department. Is this where all?
This is year 3 of a 3-year project.
That's right. I was gonna say, I think this is it. Yeah. So then we'll be up to date with. They're lighter. They're have a greater capacity.
Better capacity later, more state of the art.
Yeah, so not only obviously new, but there's some additional elements there. It's time to replace the Ford Command truck. Is this the duty officer's vehicle? And then the 2 bylaw vehicles are scheduled to be updated and replaced. In particular, if we're going to, we're definitely going to CPO ones, but if we are going to consider some additional traffic duties, then it's an ideal time to make that change as well. So.
Councillor Sorensen.
And so the reason we're not leasing these is because we have to customize them so much.
Yeah, it's difficult to lease this type of vehicle. Yeah.
Yeah.
I had the same questions, Councilor Sorensen.
Councillor Shrek?
What's the difference in between one, like the $2,000 or $15,000 more, the Ford Command truck, and then I'm thinking, wouldn't they all be similar?
No, different
Force
vehicles.
service vehicles have more options.
Yeah.
Your fire trucks, basically it's got its emergency lights and its siren and all that, which the enforcement services also have, but it will also have to be set up for those traffic services with the cameras, the.
So it's the option.
It's the internal and
options.
additional equipment, yeah.
Okay, I just looked at the price and I thought they're all similar vehicles, so.
We're actually going for Corvettes for the,
We need a lot more money than that, my friend.
Actual total cost.
know.
then. Okay,
Yeah.
I was just curious why they were different and similar, but.
But that cost is all encompassing of all the package.
So these numbers is the unit rigged, ready to go?
That's right.
Okay, that I understand.
any additional questions on protective services there? You can see these are funded from reserves, which is good, but it's also, again, when that money is spent, it's gone, and you'll
So-
see after we'll talk about the reserve levels as well.
So just a few questions, and then Councillor Bevan. Where are we on the fire training structure? Is work ongoing? Do we have any timelines?
Yep.
And then with the vehicles, how old are the vehicles that we're replacing?
Yeah, the fire training structure, regardless, like I said, we have had quite a few discussions with the county on it. We've done a lot of preliminary work. We were very hoping to be able to start building the structure this fall. September weather, I think, is a big part of it. It just was not conducive to building. So a lot of those plans are happening, but the beauty of it is that the county's taking the lead on this project. So they've expended some funds, but we're not applying, our portion until we actually get the structure going. And more than realistic, springtime, we'll see that actual construction of the facility going up.
Okay.
The years of the vehicles, all three vehicles are 2009s, they're in their 10-year life,
Holy cow.
Yeah.
and then they high mileage on them.
They had no value left in them. Okay.
Through the chair, on your fire structure and that, once this thing is built and that, we'll have a cost associated with maintaining it with the county too?
Our strategy is to kind of look at we're working on that whole strategy as to what is the long-range vision, or what are the long-range capital implications. This is the biggest portion of it right now, to get the building built, some training pods. Beyond that, it's the operational part. Is our goal is to have both fire departments kind of trained up to use it. So we would go, our guys have the training, how to operate, how to access. Their people would do the same. So operationally, really, that's the cost that will be really absorbed into our current budget. It's a training budget.
Okay. Councillor Byron and Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair to Al. So if this is what our capital portion is proposed for 2019, are we seeing the same kind of thing for 2020, or are our vehicles in good shape?
You have a 5-year plan, and we have a 5-year plan and a long 20-year plan. The big thing right now, 2020, 2021, we have no purchases anticipated on the fleet side of it. Our next vehicle comes in around the 2022, 2023. Our next major purchase for an engine, we are looking at about 2026. So we're about, 2026 is about 8 years away. And that'll put that engine at a 20-year life cycle, which is a good time to cycle more, about 20 years. The fire engine runs about that. So we're about 8 years away from a major purchase.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good.
Thank you, Mr. Schramm.
Thanks, Al.
Public Works.
I think these ones basically speak for themselves. They're basically replacing a few 1-tons and 3/4-ton pickup. I don't really have anything to add to that unless council.
My only comment is V129. I don't know how you can buy a 110 for $40,000, but is there money coming back from auction or something to increase that?
That is a good question. I do
That
not know
number
the
seems
answer to that,
very unrealistic to me. So unless they're looking at
we must be
buying a
getting it from
leaseback or
Dodge then, I
something.
guess. Oh, I'm just teasing.
Even yeah.
Do you know what? I think what may have happened here is the 1-ton and the 3/4-ton maybe are reversed as well. But even then, I'm not confident in the pricing. So,
Yeah.
Bridget, do you know off the top of your head?
I'm actually not sure.
We'll definitely verify this before it
Doesn't
comes
matter
back.
what brand you're buying; they should be around 60.
I agree.
So
Yeah.
that number just seems odd. Even if they are purchasing one without a box, it doesn't make a big difference. So
Sure. No, that's good feedback. Thank you.
okay. I don't even know if you can get a half ton for 40,000.
Not a very good one.
No. Airport. Unless anybody has any other questions on that?
Okay. The airport, so an apron blade, this is a snow removal piece of equipment. And then they're asking for a new mower deck and then a gator that helps them. They have to go out and do fence inspections, and it's actually quite a large swath of land that they spend some time out. So do fencing repairs and other observations.
Councillor Wilkinson?
Okay, just administration, they got that huge machine for a huge amount of money. Is this apron blade a replacement on that machine?
No, this would, I believe this works with the loader they have there.
Okay.
Yeah, and so the big machine is almost is exclusively just used on the runway, but they still have the parking lot and the apron and the other areas where they do that clearing.
Topic then, have we had good service with that big machine?
They've been thrilled with it, yeah.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
So we were sort of the prototype for Canada, weren't we?
Yeah,
Really?
no, they've been really, really happy, but it hasn't broken down yet. We'll see the first time it breaks down and we have to have someone repair it, yeah. But in terms of its utility, I think it's been incredibly functional. Unless Bridget, you have anything else to add to that?
No, that is actually very accurate.
They've used it twice just this last week.
It was a hit in the parade last year,
Yeah,
so.
Yeah, it was a hit in the parade.
Yeah. Okay, that explains it. Thank you, sorry.
Yeah, and you can see that there's a portion of that is cost shared with the county as well, so.
Okay. Roads and transportation, the big money.
Yeah, so perhaps I'll have Dowett come up here and, so a budget allocated of 6.5 million, and Dowett can describe all what he would anticipate that would be encapsulated in that, so.
Welcome back, Dowett.
So these are the infrastructure upgrades that we hope to accomplish in 2019. The location of the fantastic Surrey Lab from 48th Street, or from inside the Kingsman Park all the way to 2nd Street. That will include now replacing the water line, not just replacing and upgrading the water line, the sewer line, pockets of stormwater line, and of course constructing the road structure all the way to just the underside of a pavement. The other block would be on 18th Ave from 48th Street, all the way to west of 49th Street to the cul-de-sac there. Just continuing with what we started last year on the northwest part of town. And the third area would be Monrovia Street or 43A Street from 2nd Ave to 4th Ave. These are the areas that this budget will take care of.
As per your update on strategic planning, Councillor Byer.
Through the chair to Dowett, you said it was, can you just re-say what you had said at the beginning? It was to replace the water lines, the sewer lines, the road replacement, and I think there was something else?
Stormwater.
Oh, the stormwater, okay.
Okay, Councillor Sorensen, Councillor Wilkinson.
So I'm glad to hear that this includes a lot of water, sewer lines. So is it all come out of the roads reserve, or does it get pulled out of water reserves and sewer reserves as well?
Yeah, so the majority of this is proposed to come from revenue sharing this year. Yeah.
Councillor
Through the
Wilkinson.
chair, what are we doing about First Avenue? I mean, that can go airborne in the bumps in there.
That's kind of the fun of it.
I anticipate that you would see a proposal for next year's budget consideration to
2020.
address First Avenue. So.
It is on the radar though. Councillor Curry and Councillor Chouinard.
Just because not everyone's at strategic planning, so all of these in our asset management come back as extreme, right? These are like high priorities for our asset management?
Yes, so we have considered two factors. One is the upgrades that we need to do, and the other one is because they're old, they need to be replaced. They're at the end of their life. Some are as old as 83 years old.
Oh, that's not old. Come on now.
They're that young.
Okay.
So I think when Dowett suggests upgrades, that includes if there's capacity issues or other items, and so it's a blend between the conditioning and the asset management pieces and some of those other components that go into that.
Councillor Sorensen and Councillor Byer.
We were at that disaster planning workshop, and they mentioned something that I wasn't really familiar with. It was called a one trench policy. Can you explain that to me? And also, are these improvements going to help any of the red areas for low water pressure?
Yes,
map?
so the upgrade will be in the water pressure area.
Okay.
The upgrading is necessitated because of the pressure.
Okay.
The thing is, when you have 3 deep utilities within a road width, you're almost eating all the road structure. So it makes a lot of sense then to go ahead and do a full road build. So the idea of really cutting and dealing with this deep infrastructure is helpful in the sense that, because since you are eating almost all the road, you would also be ending up with a new road structure. So it's not just a deep utilities that we are looking at upgrading, but also the road structure as part of the asset management.
Does that answer your question on the
Do we have a one
trench?
trench policy, or is that something that we decided not to do?
The one trend is if you have a French box, then you'll have slithers of road left on the road structure left in between. So in fact, we don't really, when we announce the work for the deep utilities, we don't really put the road structure component in it. Because if you do, then they'll be coming with French boxes, and just do that, and they'll have a wider area that they would want you to pay them. But if they are cutting right through, then it's a 3-to-1 or something, so wider road, then they almost invariably eat the whole road width. Makes it cheaper for us to talk to them about road construction when they do that. So.
And whenever we open up a trench, we replace all of the old sewer, water, stormwater, everything gets
we
replaced.
replace everything so that we don't have to come back
Right,
and open that, including service lines too.
Yeah, I think that's where I would suggest our philosophy definitely lines up with the one trench philosophy, where
If you're digging,
if you're digging, then you replace it. And fortunately for us, it's usually okay because all the infrastructure is old, so it's not a problem to make that as assessment. But yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Byer, you have anything
Yeah.
else? Yeah.
Through the chair to Jawed. So I believe at our strategic report you talked about the capacity issues around the Kingston Park with the new seniors lodge going in there, and that will help enhance that facility. So when it comes online, then it will be working optimally, kind of.
So we really, when it comes to the seniors lodge, we'll be only upgrading a portion of it.
Okay.
Downstream, there'll be a lot more work to be done in the future, but as part of this package, we will be replacing a portion of the sewer line and also looping the water line so that we don't have to come into a new parking lot. We have a very old pipe under that parking lot. So by having the water flowing into the Kingston Park from Bose, 47 and 7th Ave intersection, and also from 48 and 8 intersection, then you don't have to deal with the old stretch that we don't want to touch this.
Right.
I don't know if I've answered.
Yes. So in addition, though, if this is going to come back up at the committee in a week and a half or whatever that is, can we get a visual? That way the public can see what that $6.5 million will.
Maps, you mean, of where this is taking place?
Yeah. Just so a visual is sometimes easier than just reading the numbers on our paper.
Yeah, this is what I say, the GIS where we can just
totally
splash it up there in the maps, because
Totally get it.
he says like 7th Ave, and I
I
really
know.
have to like.
Where is that? Yeah.
I would have come in back.
No, it's okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Any other questions for Dawid on
Thank
that?
you. I'm very happy with, I gotta just make sure, see your arm up or not. I'm very happy with 7th Avenue. If you travel that stretch of road, it's very, very bad. So it's nice to see that work being done. I don't know where 9th Ave is between 49th Street and 51st, but that road's pretty rumbly, tumbly. So I'm not sure where that is in our capital plan, but something I certainly would like to see accomplished in the next few years.
We just mark it as a recreational 4x4 trail, and yeah.
I have some choice words for my counselors every time I drive that road. So, and of course, First Avenue as well. So, thank you, Dawit.
I think Dawit would also be able to answer any questions or comment on the water well exploration. My understanding is that this is, council had basically, I think, indicated that they were okay to kind of see us back off of the water well exploration we've done in the past. My understanding is this is actually just a continuation of the project that was already ongoing. It's not an additional project.
Yes, it's the budget in 2018 that we'll be using to finish up what we started in 2018.
Okay.
No new budget.
Okay, good. Thanks.
Councilor Bevan.
Oh, sorry.
Through the chair, on our water wells and that, we do explorations and that, and we drill them, we get water, and if there's some that we will ever use, what do we do with them? Can we use them anyplace else? Like if the water is too high in the mineral, we can't treat it, we can't do whatever, and yet we got a good flow there. Can we use that for anything else?
Yeah, the requirement is that we completely seal it
Okay.
because of contamination fears. And you have to have a dedicated line for those wells if you want to use them. Because you cannot use it as part of the network that we have because you'll be contaminating the rest of the water that flows into our system. So it's, I think you read the same question during the metric. It's the same, it's as far as the environment goes, we are required to cap them and seal them. But if we are to use them dedicated for something else except for water consumption, then the infrastructure that you need, a dedicated infrastructure to do that, would be very expensive, and I don't think it's worthwhile cost.
So if we don't use it for water consumption ourselves, but we are using it to clean our roads with, and it goes to the water treatment plant or whatever, is that a possibility, or do we have to do more with the water treatment plant to take care of what's coming in there?
Yeah, I think what happens is the practicality of creating the system whereby we can access the well, as well as depending on where the well is located, it kind of takes away from the efficiencies you might gain of using the water. But we have definitely considered some of those possibilities.
Councilor Meyer.
Through the chair to administration, just to back up, to go back to roads and transportation, so that 2.6 million is from reserves, that 3.8, is that MSI? Or what is that
MSI,
grant
gas
fund?
TAC fund, and what's called SIP, right?
It's called basic
What have they changed it?
transportation.
Oh, yeah, they keep changing the names on me.
From long
Basic Municipal Transportation Grant, BMTG, and we get a portion of those every year. But they the gas tax fund and the BMGT, some combination of those letters. They actually have quite narrow mandates on what we can use them for. Basically, water and sewer, and so we dedicate them generally to these types of projects.
So we're confident that we'll get those?
They are guaranteed.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
We know we're
Okay.
getting those.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else? Thank you, Dawit. We're going to move on to parks.
So I think if council has some specific questions about the types of equipment, but generally here, a replacing of a mower, a new mower system for the cemetery, which will also include the ability to do some sweeping, which means collecting of debris and leaves and that type of thing, which can really enhance that. The trackless contour mower, this is for areas where there's grades that are dangerous for mowing, and this machine makes it a lot safer and easier for our staff to take care of those grades. And then we are proposing a continued investment into the parks, more particularly the trail systems of $200,000 as we have in years past. But if you have any more specific questions, Jim can add some detail to that.
Councilor Schillard.
Like on these mower decks, I understand, but the ones that are like 67,000 where we're actually leasing the other equipment, have we explored the option? Because sometimes lawn equipment can get very high maintenance. So we explored the option of savings to lease these pieces of equipment?
We are looking at all options. We certainly can continue with that.
Yeah.
That's something that I can't recall if we lease anything.
I don't think for parks we are.
Okay. We'll certainly investigate that.
I think also with parks, the mowers, we're often using them to the end of their life as well,
Okay.
and so that changes the dynamic in terms of leasing versus purchasing and
Okay,
and
so a
that
lot
type of thing. So
a lot of these long decks, we're not replacing, like, we're gonna run them until.
Right, so
Yeah.
one we're replacing right now is
Just
a
be
06
too
John Deere,
Okay,
and another smaller mower is a 2010, so they are used, you know, from May 1st to end of September, they're used almost daily.
so if we're yeah, I would agree, if we're getting 10 years out of them, they are worn out.
yeah.
Councillor Byron and Councillor Bevan.
Through the chair, I was just gonna ask what the average lifespan of these equipment were.
Correct.
So
Councillor,
10
yes.
years is the number?
Up
or-
until last year, we still had some from '01 and maybe a bit earlier.
We would anticipate for a general riding apparatus 10 years is kind of our objective. And they honestly do more of an hour basis, and we get high hours out of them because they're running basically all seasons.
Okay, so further to that, so how many pieces of equipment do we have? Like in 2020, would we expect the same kind of thing in this budget for equipment, or would that be decreased?
This basically exhausts the park's reserve, so
Oh, okay.
unless council is incredibly gracious, then I don't think parks can anticipate any significant
Oh.
equipment purchases in the near future there.
Okay.
But I do think that they were. The truth is that we, for a long time, kind of treated parks as like a quasi half department, and they kind of had to go through Public Works to get all their purchases, and so as you can see, they're starting to buy some real purpose-built equipment like a contour mower, things like that, and the lawn sweeper and pieces of equipment that just enhance their ability to provide the level of service that they are. But I do think that they've done the majority of replacing their equipment needs or their major equipment needs here in the last few years. So.
Thank you, Councillor Ryder. Councillor Bevan and then Councillor Wilkinson. and
Administration.
Councillor Sorensen.
So, on this Parks and Trails here, you guys have that little, I'm not sure what it is, little Tonka toy that fits on the sidewalks that you can put a blower on it or you can put a sweeper on it. Would that be able to be used in the Parks and Trails with a attachment to it instead of going out and buying something new or whatever?
We do use it.
Yeah, that
We
would
have
be,
various
and that,
attachments for it and for various purposes, but it doesn't replace some of the more
No.
finishing mowers that we need.
well, if it's finishing more is a different thing. I just looking at keeping the trails clean or whatever and that, and it's nice and skinny because it goes on their sidewalk, so going down the trail would be
Sure. And we have a
very
brush
nice.
for it, so we are
Yes.
able to take the ice right off the trails with it.
Good.
Yeah.
Councillor Wilkinson and Councillor Sorensen.
Okay, I would just say you do have this enhanced equipment, but also you've done an enhanced job, say at the cemetery. I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No, I think we're definitely seeing them in all our parks. I think we're we're providing a very good level of service there.
Very good.
Yeah.
Councillor Sorensen.
I would like to see more funding for trail development. It's no shock to anyone here.
No.
I did not see this coming.
However, maybe we could take this 200,000 and double it with county support and maybe this Foothills RMA group to get a trail out to Wilmore Park, some kind of cost sharing initiative there, group effort.
Yeah, certainly should council will it, we'd be happy to invest more money in the trail system. For this $200,000, we do have a project in mind. The biggest part of that is the completion on 63rd Street and 13th Avenue. And so we do think that that is the most critical issue in our trail system that needs to be addressed this next year. We could definitely pursue additional projects, and we could come back to council for funding of those projects as they materialize in terms of a partnership with a trail out to Wilmore Park or something of that nature.
All right, Councillor Byron.
Through the chair to administration, I'm also with Councillor Sorensen on this. I would like to see an increase in our trail funding. If it's not this year, then years in following. Trails are something that enhance the community and increases quality of life. There's lots of different factors that go into that, which isn't a surprise. My question is on the completion on the 63rd and 13th. Will that 200,000 complete the trail in that location, or is that just to work towards completion of that?
Yeah, we're hopeful that it will help us get around the corner. Basically, it's always dependent on contractor rates and that type of thing, but we're hopeful that that $200,000 would basically allow us to connect where the trail enters 63rd Street to where the sidewalk is on 13th Avenue.
Right.
Councillor Sherrod.
The 200,000 is something that we've been doing long time, continuing the trails. I'd like to comment about like the F, whatever those initials are, as I call them, the CAP. That, hopefully that could play into doing major trails for us. But 200,000, remember, 2% tax.
This is from reserve.
Oh,
Yeah,
but
but
so
the
what, gotta be
taxpayers-
pretty.
I believe this is, yeah, this $200,000 is actually coming from the MSI, the provincial grant, yeah.
But
And at present, our MSI is completely allocated, so if there was additional funding, it would either have to come from taxation or from reserve.
All right, just further comment, I'm really happy to see us pursuing that connector 63rd to 13th. I hope we can get it done next year. That's a major concern. I'm surprised we haven't had some incident there yet. It's highly utilized. And I'm glad to see the investments in these mowers. I think our Parks Department has just done a tremendous job. My question has to do with, as I brought up earlier, washroom facilities at the bike park at Wilmore. How are we going to address that? When we open and cut the ribbon on that, it's going to be a big event, and I don't want us to look half.
Yes.
Yeah. I want to make sure that we have everything in place to really make that place shine, because it's going to launch us into, I think, a huge tourism opportunity. As well as we've talked previously about having a light in Hillendale, which will allow people to utilize that park in the evenings, especially in the wintertime, for no particular purpose. Just want to see where we are on that. And also we discussed at retreat possible traffic lights at the A&W intersection. I don't see anything allocated here for that. So
Maybe I'll answer the traffic light portion
Sure.
quickly. We're waiting to hear from Alberta Transportation on the costing. We have had that conversation with them at an administrative level.
okay.
And that was their first process, was doing a design and costing, at which point we will bring it back to council for consideration.
Okay. Thank you.
In terms of Wilmore Park bathrooms, I think we're looking at a minimum of $200,000 to construct a facility that will basically last forever. They're concrete prefab buildings that they come in, put in. They have all steel fixtures in them and that type of thing. And so this is just right off the top of my head from previous experience, just so council kind of has an idea of what we're talking about in terms of dollars for adding a restroom facility there. I don't know the additional costs in terms of providing the septic portion of that, because there's obviously no sewer out there. That would have to be on a septic system as well. So.
Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair, I'm just really wondering if we won't be able to find funding from that FRMA group, even for the outhouses, seating, whatever, before the opening, so that it's prepared.
We'll certainly be happy to approach them and see if
I
they have
really
interest in that.
Certainly picnic tables, I know they said they made picnic tables and things
Perhaps
like
what I
that,
would
so
suggest
why
is
not
if
use it?
council is comfortable, that we would just task Jim with bringing back a report or preliminary estimate on what it would cost to add a new renewed washrooms facilities there at Wilmore Park, and we can certainly fund that, I think, external to this budget. But I do think it is a worthwhile pursuit for sure.
But I think spectator seating, honestly, I'm not joking about that, for the opening and stuff. I think there's going to be a huge need for that out there too. It's going to be
And for ongoing
spectacular
use,
to
yeah,
watch.
for ongoing use too.
It really is.
Councillor Bevan, Councillor Sherrod.
I also think, to the chair, I also think that, if we're gonna sign up to be a part of the FRMA, that, we have a wish list, what we would like to see for our town, so we can go to them and say, this is what our wish list is like, how can you help us with it? And then they know what we would specifically want, and they can go down the list and say, yeah, that's good, but we can't do that, that's not in our role of scout. But then, we have a wish list that we give them, so he says, well, you guys want $1 million, we can give you 800,000 of it, which, for example, I think we get a wish list what we want to see from them, and then.
Councillor Sharp.
It must be getting late, he read my mind, that's exactly what I was gonna say.
In Hillendale Park, lights.
Yeah, I think we'll just have to look into it. I don't think it's something that we've done, but we can certainly review that.
What about seating there and picnic tables? Like,
They got
these
stuff.
guys
They
do
do.
this stuff.
There's,
They do
there's
that
picnic
stuff.
tables there.
Okay.
Councillor Bevan.
They already got 4 of my picnic tables there.
Oh.
I believe if you go back to before I was on council, that it was in the budget at one time that they had made arrangements to have a light put in there. There's electrical there and everything else.
Oh, I'm so sorry. You're talking about Hilland at the pond.
At the pond.
I was
yes.
thinking at the park, and I'm like,
No, not
why?
the playground.
Like, why? I'm like, why haven't?
The pond.
Why can't I
Yeah,
recall
the
this
pond,
conversation?
yeah.
But you're talking about the lighting at the pond. Okay.
Yeah.
And it
Not
was-
to be used for any specific purpose.
That's
Yeah,
right.
Just
For
actually so we can
liability
see to
issues.
make sure that no one's
no one's
using
Yeah.
it. Yeah, that's
swimming,
right. That's
right.
right. Yeah, we'll just have to do a little work on that. I certainly agree with Councillor Bevan that the facilities are accessible and the cost wouldn't be exorbitant to do that. I don't know that we'll put in the type of super flood lighting that we've enjoyed
No,
there in
because they
the
want
last
the
couple of years, but
light
we can definitely look into that.
Yeah. Okay. Councillor Fire.
Through the chair to administration. Right now, I've heard from a few residents that Hillendale, through the paths, there's not lighting on the trails from Hillendale to 6th Ave. I haven't actually confirmed that myself. Is there any way to get on that small section some lighting for safety? Just to connect them so they can get to 6th Ave and
We're right by the hospital, there's.
yeah, there's just like a, yeah, it's a small.
What type of light? Like, are you just referring to like kind of like street lighting?
It's
or-
something like that, yeah.
We just don't have it. We just don't have it on any of our trails, so I'm not sure
Oh,
why.
okay.
I'm not sure why we would.
It
Put it
just
there.
because when you're walking on a sidewalk, you have lighting, right? So, but if someone is not, if they're from Hillendale and they're going to the rest of the town, there's a portion there that doesn't have lighting. For
I know what
safety,
she's saying,
like-
so like,
It's only about 2 meters.
yeah,
Oh, it's
so
a couple hundred
they-
meters,
they
yeah, it's
put in
not-
a sidewalk behind the trailers there, so you don't have to
no,
walk on the road.
yeah.
Yeah.
But there's trees there, so typically if you were walking on a sidewalk, because that's
Sidewalk.
that's your
Right.
sidewalk is to get to
Yeah,
the.
I don't think
But-
I personally think that's a trail,
That's
and
right.
we're not
And there's
lighting
lights
any,
on
and we're
the
not
road.
lighting any of our trails. So I'm not sure why we would light that
No.
section and not other
Cut
sections.
the trees down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was just a safety thing,
Yeah,
right? Because,
yeah, yeah.
it's almost like a sidewalk that connects, Hillendale to 6th Ave.
Yeah.
But then there's not the lighting to accommodate it.
No, I appreciate that. But I mean, certainly, I personally don't know that we would put lights there, but if council wants us to take a look at it, we definitely can. But
I
Councillor
personally
Weston.
don't think so either. I mean, the road's there, you're walking parallel to the road, there's lights on the road. It's not much of a safety issue, I wouldn't think.
I think the fact that you're off the road kind of eliminates the major need to be lit, right?
Councillor Brady.
I mean, I still, in the future, would like to see lighting be a part. And I know that it would be expensive, I know we have to look at different parts, but in the future, at some point, I would like our trails to be lit, because that would make them more usable, especially in the winter. We are nicely,
Starting on Sunday, it starts to get dark about 5
well,
o'clock.
that's just it. So we are clearing them in the winter, which is fantastic for everybody that doesn't work 8 till 5. And they're without lighting, they're not, safety wise, they are not, and just safety wise, purely animal wise, after 5. So I know that that's huge, and I know it's would take time and a lot. I would just like to even see some research on possibilities of what it would look like, whether that would have to be solar, whether we'd be tied into ours, what that would be.
I think we have our first item for next year's strategic planning session.
All right, moving on to recreation, multi-use facility. I think that's pretty self-explanatory.
Yeah, so mostly we just wanted to make sure that this got in there for a couple of reasons. One is that it has to be budgeted before Sarah can begin any debenture processes. And also, it's certainly my belief that there's no reason that we shouldn't keep this thing moving forward and possibly begin construction in 2019. Obviously, this budget is based on what we know today and may need to be adjusted as we learn more in the future, but we wanted to get that reflected in the budget.
Councillor Sorensen.
I mean, obviously I'm full support of this, but just wondering why, if we only had 50% ownership, why we would have the whole project in our budget.
We don't.
Because
So they would be
The whole
providing.
40 million is in there, I know.
No, but there's up to proposed funding for
I
the
know, but
county.
usually, like, if a corporation only owned half of a project, they would only put half of the project in their.
Sure,
budget.
no, I appreciate your question. Sarah?
I think generally the municipality that takes the lead on the project is usually the one that has that in there. They're a cost sharing partner, they're cost sharing 50% of this. Same with the airport, they're cost sharing the airport, so we have the full budget in ours, but we
But
do the
we own the
purchasing and
airport,
then we
right?
charge them for their portion of it.
So we don't know this for sure yet, but if the town is going to pay the contractor, for example, then the county will give us the money, and we must have we cannot expend the money without it being reflected in the budget. And I think that's more what Sarah's suggesting is, if we're going to expend the 40 million, even though 20 of it
So
comes
we're
from
the
the
We
county.
controller?
have to have it in our budget.
Pardon me?
Are we the controller for the project?
banker.
We don't know. I honestly, that's not a detailed conversation we've had with the county, and I'd be perfectly happy for it to go the other way. I don't think it matters to me much. Mostly, we just wanted to have the project there in place, and if it's in our budget, the whole amount, then we know at least one party's got it there, and away we go. So, I did also let Jack know that we were going to be presenting this for council's consideration.
With the 40,000 in it.
With the 40
40
million.
million.
That's right.
How I wish.
All right. Any other questions? All right, we'll move on to reserve funds. We're almost done here, folks. Oops.
You might have a little more luck looking at your iPads
Yeah,
than the
sorry.
screens there,
It's,
but.
It's a little smaller writing.
So Sarah will just run us through the effect the proposed budgets will have on our reserves.
So the opening balance of I'll go through the capital first. The opening balance of this is subject to change based on our actual year-end, 2018 year-end costs, but sort of projected opening balance for 2019 you can see there. And basically all that we've gone through today is reflected in these ins and outs with these reserves. So if we look even down the bottom here, you can see the RSA amounts that we've been talking about. Some RSA to operations, the 2019 road rehab we just spoke about, the server replacement is using some of the RSA, excuse me. And then if you'll notice I've put a word new next to a new reserve that we're proposing. So we're proposing to move $2 million over towards a future civic or cultural facility. So just as we were putting some money aside for the multiplex, we thought this might be an opportunity to start a new reserve to put some money aside for that kind of future facility. So that is something that we're just proposing with this particular reserve in front of you here.
Okay, we'll open the floor to questions and comments. Councillor Sorensen and Councillor Wilkinson.
Do we have benchmarks for any of these reserves that I should be worried about, like that we're falling below any level? Is there a rule of thumb that a town our size should have so much in reserves? Or?
That's a very good question, and I'm sure Sarah would be happy to tell Mike to do some research on this. So, no, I'm not aware of external ones, although I'm sure there are some best practices that we can find. What I would suggest is internally, we would just be looking at our 5 and 10 and long-term capital plans and to see if our reserves were on track to support those plans. I think we can see that for the most part they're not, quite honestly, and we've got some work to do there. I think we are improving and getting better, but I do think it is very, very helpful to be able to set some targets and objectives that will give us a frame of reference for where we are there.
Okay, Councillor Wilkinson and Councillor Byer.
Okay, that third line down, Johnson Establishment, General Estate. Oh, okay, sorry, okay.
So that's the area around, is it Wilshire? We had to
Wilshire,
build a stormwater pond there
Wilshire.
for that.
Was it named for the mayor there?
I'm not sure, sorry.
Okay, just curious.
Councillor Byer?
Through the chair to administration. On the administration top line there, transfers out 60,000 for the server replacement. I thought we have $115,000 budget. Is that something different, or am I missing?
Yes, so I've used 60,000 from the administration reserve, and I've also used 55 from the revenue sharing reserve. So I've split that one between two reserves. If you look at the box at the bottom on the right of those reserves, you can see I've used 55,000
Oh, okay.
and 60 from the administration.
Okay. I got you.
Any other questions, comments? I'm very happy that we are including the $2 million for a future civic cultural facility. I think it's really important that we start planning. We were addressing our recreation needs with the multi-use facility. We also have needs in this building in particular, theater capacity as well as the library, and we got to start building a plan moving forward, and I think this is a good positive step forward. And I see a lot of great work that we're doing here, and I see our reserves. We factor in that what we're doing with the multiplex, our reserves are starting to get more healthy as we go along here. So that's positive.
Yeah, one of the things I would suggest as well is that to keep in mind that any sale of land, in particular in Hillendale, it goes back into funding some of these reserves as well. And so we have approximately $10 million of investment that we're hoping to see come back over time as well to support the reserves. Buried treasure.
So that's the capital reserves that will be brought forward. And moving on to the operating. Again, these are just the things that we spoke about within the operating budget being shown here. As well, there'll be those additions for the ones that we are adding in, the 50,000 from the medical centre will, which reserve would that be? We'll look into that.
Perhaps, yeah. I mean, I might suggest that it could go towards the future operation of the multiplex.
I'd agree with that.
Can you repeat what you just said?
So council's instructed us to remove $50,000 of the revenue from the medical center lease from supporting taxation and transferring it to reserve instead. And the question was just which reserve, where would that money go? And I just suggested that we could use it to continue to support the building of a reserve for the operation of the future multiplex.
Sound good?
Yeah, I think it's really critical that we do have an operational reserve there, because once we open that facility, we are not going to know what those costs are going to be, depending on usage and what we build. So it'd be nice to have a rainy day fund in order to manage that.
It can act as a mini tax stabilization fund as we get a feel for if we do have to increase taxes, say 5%, but you can do it over time if you've built a little reserve that you can rely on for a period of time. So,
yeah, Councillor Sorensen.
No one's gonna like this comment, but
On the trail system.
the 258,000 we're taking from the tax stabilization, I suggest we reduce that so that our total tax increase this year is 4.5% exactly. Everybody around the room said they were in support of 4.5.
No.
Not everybody.
The majority.
We can certainly look at that once we've gone through all these adjustments.
All these
and,
amendments.
20,000.
see where we are.
I think that would just, if council
It's-
feels that they are supportive of that, we would be happy to do that. But
You already put your hands
I
up
see.
before.
Perhaps we can just have a show of hands for those who are supportive of that.
Oh, doing what again?
Placing the tax increase at 4.5,
Because you told me we weren't gonna.
and whatever difference would then reduce this
The tax
amount
sta-
taken from the tax stabilization fund.
Yeah, that makes
All in
sense.
favor? All opposed?
So we'll generally pursue that as well. So.
I'm not sure what he wanted.
All right, I think we are done, ladies and gentlemen. So once again, thank you to administration for spending your Saturday with us. You know, this was the most exciting, invigorating conversation that you anticipated to have here, and thank you, council, for making the time as well. It's been a long day, so thank you very much. I do have a question though. This has been a full day. We do have opportunity within our council bylaw to charge a full meeting day rate. This is a special occasion. Whether or not council wants to pursue that or not, I'll leave it up to council to decide that. Nope.
No.
But I'd also like to bring something else up. I'd like this like on a Tuesday or something next time. I have grandchildren, and on the weekend I like to spend time if they're doing something to watch them. The weekend is a working day for me.
Council.
Obviously, I'm gonna say the opposite of
Same
that.
here.
I have a full-time job, so when I work on a Tuesday, I take a holiday to spend it doing this,
Yeah.
so
As we
I
have
would
to.
prefer to, I thank you for having it on a Saturday.
Councillor Sherrod?
I would be against weekends. Saturdays is my day. We want Sunday, yeah, but Saturday is my day I sleep in. So I prefer weekdays or even evenings. Start at 7
Yeah,
o'clock and
and
go
do 2
and go to
evenings.
midnight.
I don't think we're gonna get midnight.
Yeah. Councillor Sorensen?
If this was a work day, I would support the
Yes,
extra
okay.
funding for
But it's not.
reimbursement, but it's not. So
Yeah.
It's not working.
And that would be my point. If we do it during the week, then there has to be some, because
To
just like
compensate you
Councillor
for your
Curry,
job.
I have to take
Yeah, exactly.
vacation days, so.
I lose money when I-
Compensate.
All right.
Are we
Motion
still
for
on?
adjournment? Do we need a motion?
No,
Just
No,
what's that?
we don't
No.
need it, because I didn't.
Just
We'll take it, Jim.
So what you'll see now at the next committee meeting is based on this feedback, this budget will come back in a more of a presentation style rather than this kind of working papers that we went through today. And it will be reflective of the feedback that we received then. But we will be beginning Monday to give this information to Citizen Budget, the program that will develop it for the online tool. Doesn't mean it can't be tweaked or adjusted, but we need to start that process right away. So basically, what I'm saying is the information that you supplied us today will feed those processes, which will ultimately determine what goes to the public. Although we're anticipating that not releasing that until council was to approve that at that committee meeting on the 13th. So anything to add to that process-wise, Sarah?
For the budget presentation? No, that definitely on the 13th it will come back to the committee. Then we're hoping Citizen Budget will be, it's a very short time frame. We're hoping it can go live the next day. It may take a couple of days after that. And then we can monitor that and then bring back any suggestions or comments we might have got from that on the 27th. So we'll come back to the committee meeting on the 27th to do any last minute tweaking of the budget that you may wish. And then bring it back. Our intent is to bring it back on the 4th of December to council for actually passing of that budget.
Okay. Thank you.
And thanks to council for your thoughtful part of this process. I know it's a long day, but it's really important work, and I feel like it's better to do it all at one and go through it than to try and break it up into a couple of days. I think that gets challenging as well. So,
Thank you for not.
but it is an investment of your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you for not making it a
Yep.
committee the whole meeting last time.
All right. Thank you.
Everything.
Thanks very much.